Chapter 1583. As the saying goes, one's hands are tied. Even the great emperors were happy to hear that. Their grudge with the venerable of numinous treasure stemmed from his theft of their divine artifacts. Now that they'd all been returned to them, even though they'd originally belonged to them, the venerable of numinous treasure was the one who'd returned them. Their enmity had lessened considerably. If they went overboard, it would indeed be inexcusable. Furthermore, they'd received other divine artifacts as compensation, especially the Ocean Emperor. The complete set of the Sea God set had fallen into his hands. In addition, he'd received a water resistance pearl that could increase the set's combat strength by 20%. What did a 20% increase in combat strength mean? In the ocean, even Zhou was nothing more than a chicken or a stray dog. However, the one in the most difficult situation was actually Great Emperor Bian, because the venerable of numinous treasure had taken care of him the most. He'd almost lost his head in anger. Now that he'd returned all his divine artifacts and received several more as compensation, he didn't know what to do. His earlier words had been too vicious, and there was practically no room for negotiation. Didn't you want to withdraw? Hurry up and leave. It just so happens I'm having a headache just looking at you. The venerable of numinous treasure rolled his eyes. The other great emperors had only returned a small amount of divine artifacts, but this Bian, he'd returned a few dozen and tossed in a dozen more. These divine items were his lifeblood. Now that he saw the Bian immortal emperor, he couldn't help but feel angry. The venerable of numinous treasure. Yi Zichen knit his brows. Since Emperor Bian had accepted the divine artifacts, that naturally meant he'd tacitly accepted the venerable of numinous treasure. Now, the venerable of numinous treasure was still bickering. If Emperor Bian really left in a fit of rage, the losses would outweigh the gains. The venerable of numinous treasure rubbed his nose. Yi Zichen cupped his hands at Emperor Bian. Great Emperor, look, your enmity with the venerable of numinous treasure was merely a dispute over divine artifacts. Now that you've returned all the divine artifacts, there's no more enmity between you. How about we call it quits? We're in the God realm, and Zhou Wu is itching to attack us. Outside, the Yaoan demons have joined forces. Our grand alliance must unite as one in order to contend against them. Besides, the venerable of Ling Bao has a profound realm, so he can be of great help to us. I know that Bian Heavenly Emperor is a magnanimous person, so I won't make a fuss about it. Don't you think so? Yi Zichen chuckled. He'd given Great Emperor Bian plenty of face. It was just as Yi Zichen had said. The main grudge between Great Emperor Bian and the venerable of numinous treasure was over divine artifacts. What angered Emperor Bian the most was that the venerable of numinous treasure had lived in the Four Direction Palace for several hundred years. Whenever he obtained a divine artifact, the venerable of numinous treasure would steal it. As time passed, the accumulated resentment grew deeper and deeper. Now that all the artifacts had been returned, there were no more grudges between him and the venerable one of Lingbao. Since Yi Zichen had given him a way out, Great Emperor Bian no longer put on airs. He nodded, snorted, and acknowledged the venerable of numinous treasure's participation. Everyone is happy. Ha ha. The hermit emperor walked out and stood between the venerable of numinous treasure and the Bian emperor. Then he gave the ocean sovereign a meaningful glance, and the ocean sovereign immediately understood. It wasn't easy for all of you great emperors to gather here. Now that numinous treasure's grudge with us has been settled, and with such a powerful ally joining our alliance has grown even stronger. Why don't you take advantage of this opportunity to stay in the Sea of Innocence for a few days and drink to your heart's content? Drinking? I like it, laughed the venerable of numinous treasure. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. The great emperors all had official business to attend to, and given the current tumultuous situation, it wasn't appropriate for them to leave their factions for too long. The venerable of numinous treasure didn't encounter any resistance. During this time, Yi Zichen even added him to the war preparations group. From time to time, he'd see the venerable of numinous treasure joking around with the other great emperors. He didn't seem at all like he'd been fighting to the death half a month ago. Yi Zichen, Yang Jian, Pu Jingwan, and the venerable of numinous treasure stood at the entrance to the second floor of the Shui family's prison. At this time, they had just come up from the second floor of the dungeon. Although there was a restriction between the first and second floor, they could still feel the terrifying and furious pressure from below. It seems the one down there is still quite irritable. Yi Zichen sighed. In the past half a month, he'd already been to the dungeons 5 times. Whether it was in the wee hours of the morning, noon, evening, or deep into the night, the Demon Emperor's emotions were never particularly stable. From time to time, he'd fly into a rage. Quite a few general-level experts on the second floor were so frightened by his aura that they aged considerably. Yi Zichen couldn't get in touch with the Demon Emperor, which made him extremely anxious. Part of the words left behind by the Master of the Outer Realm Star was about the old Demon Emperor, and the other part was about the end of the era. Before the end of the era, he had to get in touch with the Demon Emperor. Time was of the essence, and he was filled with worry. How about I just take you down there? No matter how high that old guy's cultivation is, he can't do anything to me, said the venerable of numinous treasure. No. Yi Zichen shook his head. If he wanted to get in touch with the Demon Emperor, he had to wait until his emotions were stable. He didn't just want to confirm that the person down there was the Demon Emperor. He wanted to communicate with the Demon Emperor and reach some sort of consensus. This required both emotional stability and absolute clarity of thought. Otherwise, even if he went, he wouldn't be able to make any substantial progress. If you don't need it, then forget it. I'm more than happy to relax. The venerable of numinous treasure shrugged. To tell you the truth, if I really had to face that old man, even my legs would tremble. Since you don't need me to take you down there by force, and it seems we can't go down there today anyway, let's go. Yi Zichen nodded and left the dungeon. As soon as he left, they saw the great sage, who'd been missing for half a month, leaning on his staff as he waited anxiously outside the dungeon. When Yang Jian and the others saw him, they were speechless. The venerable of numinous treasure looked him up and down curiously. You're out. At that moment, the great sage smiled and walked over. He glanced at the venerable of numinous treasure and asked, So this is the Demon Emperor? Monkey, what are you talking about? Yang Jian rolled his eyes. This is the venerable of the second floor of the dungeon, and the Demon Emperor. What are you doing here? Putting on an act? Where'd you run off to for the past half month? Didn't you say you should go down if something happened? If something really happened, you probably wouldn't even know. You already know. The great sage laughed awkwardly and scratched his head. Did you think we'd been in there for half a month? Yang Jian was speechless. Yi Zichen patted him on the shoulder and signaled for him to stop talking, then turned to the great sage. Where'd you go for the past half month? I sent you messages, but you didn't reply. You sent me messages? The great sage froze, then took out his phone and glanced at his chat window. Yang Jian, Yi Zichen, and Pu Jingwan had all sent him quite a few messages. The great sage chuckled and scratched his head. I wasn't paying attention. Chapter 1584. For better or for worse, Yi Zichen could be considered half a son-in-law of the Sea of Innocence. Furthermore, given his status, the Ocean Emperor had prepared a place for him, Yang Jian, and the others to stay, and their rooms were adjacent. Meanwhile, the great sage, Yang Jian, and Pu Jingwan stood by the window. The three of them were huddled together, looking at who knew what, but from time to time, they giggled foolishly. The venerable of numinous treasure sat in his chair, fiddling with a low-grade divine artifact Yi Zichen had taken from the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. You guys sure know how to slack off. Yi Zichen walked in, carrying 2 jugs of wine. This was the Ocean Emperor's prized possession, and he normally couldn't bear to drink it. However, he'd recently regained the Sea God's Ring, as well as the Water Resistance Pearl. The Ocean Emperor was overjoyed, so Yi Zichen took advantage of the opportunity to grab 2 more jugs and give them to the great sage. As for the others, they'd already drunk quite a bit during the great emperor's gathering. As soon as they entered the room, the great sage wrinkled his nose and glanced at Yi Zichen. The venerable of numinous treasure was even faster. Even Yang Jian and the others didn't see how he'd moved. By the time they came to their senses, a jug of wine was in his hands. He leaned against the wall and drank by himself. From the looks of it, he had no intention of sharing it with anyone else. What kind of treasure is this? The great sage blinked curiously. Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan licked their lips. Although they'd all drunk it before, it was precisely because they'd drunk it that their mouths watered. This is what the Ocean Emperor got from the Sea of Innocence. What kind of essence did she get? Yi Zichen's mind suddenly went blank. Who cares what essence it is? As long as it's good wine, that's all. Yang Jian took out a few cups and placed them on the table. He picked up the jug and filled them to the brim, then downed them all in one gulp. As the wine entered his stomach, even at Yang Jian's cultivation, he looked slightly tipsy. This wine, the great sage was amazed. He looked at the wine in the jade cup and drank it without hesitation. Good wine. Yi Zichen glanced at the others, then couldn't help but lick his lips. The wine was a thick, milky white liquid, and its aroma filled the room. Just smelling it made his blood flow faster. He picked up the wine cup and gently placed it on the tip of his nose. As the fragrance of the wine entered his nose, he immediately felt refreshed, and his pores opened up involuntarily. Gulp. The nectar tasted slightly sweet. When the wine entered his stomach, he couldn't help but feel a warm current slowly flowing in his chest. It flowed through all the meridians in his body and made the divine power in his body more active. Even though it wasn't his first time tasting this wine, it still left a lingering aftertaste in his mouth. The entire jug of wine was emptied after 2 cups. At that moment, the great sage was still pouring the last few drops of wine into his mouth. "Brother, where did you get this wine from? Do you have any more?" The great sage asked. "Didn't I tell you that this is the Sea Emperor's collection?" Recently, he was in a good mood, so he gave him a few more pots. But from the looks of it, these are the last few pots. I don't think he'll be able to deliver any more. Yi Zichen shrugged. If he doesn't give it to us, can't we go get it ourselves? The great sage put down the wine flask and slammed the table. It's not like you've just met me, old Sunday. Everyone in the heavenly court knows what I, old son, do. Do you know where he's hiding it? I'll definitely steal it back for you. Isn't that right? We could just steal it back, agreed the venerable of numinous treasure. However, as soon as he said that, he sensed something was amiss. He looked at the great sage and said, "What's steal? This is called stealing. Stealing sounds so bad. You sound like a thief." "Oh, we're kindred spirits," laughed the great sage. When he heard that, Yi Zichen couldn't help but facepalm. How did he let these two run into each other? Back when the great sage wreaked havoc in the heavenly court, during the Immortality Peach banquet, he'd nearly stolen all the offerings from the auction house and taken them all to Mount Huagua. The venerable of numinous treasure was even more so. He'd set his sights on every major expert of the upper 3 realms. Both of them were masters of treasure hunting. If the two of them ran into each other and formed a team, even the 3 emperors wouldn't let even an inch of their treasures leave their hands. "You two, stop messing around," said Yi Zichen righteously. "The Sea Empress has treated us well. Besides, we're staying with her, so no matter what, we can't attack her." "What about the others?" asked the venerable of numinous treasure. "Let me tell you, these great emperors all have some sort of treasure in their possession. Things like ambrosia and divine fruits. Let's keep an eye out for them in the future. If there's any news, we can go get some. It'll be a good opportunity for me to test out your skills." When it comes to treasure hunting, I've never been afraid of anyone. What a coincidence. Me too. Although they'd only met for less than 4 hours, the great sage and the venerable of numinous treasure felt like they regretted not having met earlier. Yi Zichen clutched his head in exasperation. He could already imagine the chaos the upper 3 realms would face in the future. However, in truth, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Not everyone in the upper 3 realms was their ally. With the great sage and the venerable of numinous treasure around, anyone who dared to go against them would be robbed of all their belongings. This was especially true of the god Emperor Zhou Wu and the demon Emperor Kuei Lin. Their treasures were absolutely frightening. If he could take all their treasures, wouldn't that be awesome? When he thought about it, even Yi Zichen was tempted. However, he quickly discarded the thought. He was a righteous person. How could he do something so sneaky? But desperate times called for desperate measures. He grinned foolishly for a while, but when he came to his senses, he saw that the others were sitting in their chairs, propping their cheeks in their hands as they discussed his every move. He's definitely up to no good. Look at him. He's drooling. Normally, he was under too much pressure. Even daydreaming wouldn't hurt. That was how Yi Zichen comforted himself. However, he couldn't lose his imposing aura in front of them. He hurriedly coughed and wiped the corners of his mouth. I'm telling you, don't even think about doing something like that. Especially you, the venerable of numinous treasure. You know better than anyone how you've spent the past 10,000 years. Besides, we're the masters of justice. We can't go down that path, Yi Zichen said righteously. The venerable of numinous treasure understood. Just now, you were imagining us taking treasures, and here I thought it was something else. Don't think too much about it. Even if we went, we wouldn't give you what we took. Who wants to take treasures? Don't bother explaining. Explaining is just covering up, and covering up is an indisputable fact, said the venerable of numinous treasure. When he saw his smug expression, Yi Zichen couldn't be bothered to bicker with him. Chapter 1585. The great sage's words stunned Yi Zichen. He thought back to the red packet server on his phone and realized that it had been far too long since he'd read their messages. The red packet server he'd set up was right above the chat window. In truth, Yi Zichen could see the group's messages every day, but he'd never clicked on them. The situation in the upper three realms was already like this. Aside from chatting with the great emperors, Yi Zichen rarely had the time to lurk in the red packet server and watch the immortals banter. Back in a modern realm, Yi Zichen loved lurking in the group and snatching up red packets from time to time. However, when he was truly imprisoned, the reincarnation of the Yellow Emperor and the invasion of the demons sealed the modern realm in ice. He rarely interacted with the other immortals. He barely even had time to lurk in and watch them chat. He simply had too many things to deal with, so much so that he neglected his old friends, who'd once brought him endless joy. When the great sage mentioned the red packet server, Yi Zichen couldn't help but reflect. He slowly took out his phone and opened the red packet server. The group was the same as usual. Just like before, the immortals of the heavenly court and underworld chatted in groups of 2s and 3s. However, from the looks of it, the messages weren't moving as fast as before. That was understandable. The immortals who'd always liked to chat had all ascended. Take Yang Jian and the great sage, for example. They'd been frequent visitors to the group, but now they had to stick by Yi Zichen's side and take care of matters, big and small. Only idealism. Are you all well? Yi Zichen wanted to liven up the group's mood, so he sent a message. To his surprise, when he'd sent a message in the past, it was no exaggeration to say that several hundred messages popped up in the blink of an eye. However, this time, even though his message popped up, it didn't explode the immortals who'd never spoken up. Immortality Peach Fairy, Big Brother, long time no see. I miss you. A row of tearful emojis, barefoot immortal. Emperor Yi, why do you have time to speak up? Wu Gang, humph, love rival. Give me back Chang'e. Furious, furious, furious. After that, the heavenly soldiers replied in the group chat. As for the Thunder God, the Lightning Mother, the 10 Yama Kings, Oxhead, Horseface, and the black and white impermanents who often appeared in the group chat in the past, they did not appear in the group chat. That was strange. Yi Zichen was very surprised at how quiet the group was. He subconsciously looked towards the great sage. The great sage just said that he went to the heavenly court. Could something have happened in the heavenly court? He didn't believe it, so he sent another red packet in the group. Yi Zichen's red packets were wiped clean in an instant. When he clicked on the red packets to see how lucky everyone else was, he instantly lost his cool. The people on it were all heavenly soldiers and ghost servants. Occasionally, a few immortals with immortal positions could be seen. However, the great immortals who used the spam in the group had yet to appear. Immortality Peach Fairy. Wow, a red packet. It's been a long time since someone sent a red packet in the group. Immortality Peach Fairy. Thank you, Big Brother. Wu Gang, give me back my chong. Even though there were very few people who received red packets, Yi Zichen frowned, then tagged Immortality Peach Fairy. Only idealism. Immortality, Peach Fairy. Why is the group so quiet? Did something happen in the heavenly court and underworld? Immortality, Peach Fairy. Everyone ascended. Only idealism. They all ascended? Queen Mother. Emperor Yi, what a rare guest. I didn't expect to see you here. Only idealism. Queen Mother. Barefoot Immortal. Is not the Queen Mother anymore. She's now the commander of the heavenly court and underworld. Only idealism. Huh? Yi Zichen was dumbfounded. Previously, the North Pole Emperor had been in charge of the heavenly court, and the North Fengdu Emperor had been in charge of the underworld. How long had it been? Now the Queen Mother had become the commander of both sides? What was going on? The amount of information was astonishing. Yi Zichen found it hard to digest. After a while, he sent the message. Only idealism. The Queen Mother has become the commander of both sides. Then the North Pole Emperor and the North Fengdu Emperor. Queen Mother. They've all ascended. Queen Mother. It's not just them. The god of thunder, mother of lightning, ox head, horse face, black and white impermanence, the 10 Yama kings. All the great immortals have ascended. Queen Mother. That's all the immortals left in the heavenly court and underworld. They're basically 2 empty shells. Queen Mother. As a commander, I'm really... The Queen Mother couldn't help but sigh. So many great immortals ascending really wasn't a good thing for her, the new commander. The 2 realms management was lacking. If they didn't properly appoint a new leader, it was no exaggeration to say that the 2 realms operations would collapse. The Queen Mother was naturally worried about who would fill the new management positions, but so many immortals ascending. It was a little strange. It wasn't that Yi Zichen hadn't returned to the lower realms before. Back when he'd spent the night drinking with the god of thunder and the others, he could tell from their auras that they hadn't even reached the immortal king level yet. In less than 3 years, they'd broken through from sky immortal to immortal king, then ascended. Even with the density of spiritual energy in the upper 3 realms, it was difficult to achieve such a rapid rise in cultivation. Great Sage, what's going on down there? Yi Zichen glanced at the Great Sage, then hurriedly replied. Only idealism. Have they all ascended? Queen Mother, probably. Whether it's the heavenly court, the underworld, the immortal region, or the endless beast region, quite a few experts have ascended to the upper and Yao realms as well, and the trend hasn't slowed down at all. Queen Mother. If this continues, the heavenly court and the underworld will completely collapse. Queen Mother. I sent someone to ask the Great Sage to come down, but even with his vast knowledge, he wasn't able to find out what was going on. Immortality Peach Fairy. Most of the fairy maidens from the Immortality Peach Garden have left, and Neza doesn't say anything in the group anymore. Life in the group is super boring. Kitchen God, it's so free. I don't even need to prepare dinner for those great immortals. Heavenly Soldier. It's been 13 days since Commander Lei ascended. I miss him. Heavenly Soldier B. After Yu Lao left, his disciples messed up marriage fates. Right now, all of the realm's fates are in a mess. There are triangles, 4 corners, and 5 corners relationships everywhere. Ghost Enforcer, because of this, who knows how many people have died. Even the underworld's mission is too heavy. Ghost Enforcer, but the king of Yama of the underworld hasn't been chosen yet, so we don't know what to do with those ghosts. Queen Mother the West. I hope that you can quickly choose a judge for the underworld. Chapter 1586. Just from the words on the screen, Yi Zichen felt like he could sense the Queen Mother's serenity. Despite her peaceful temperament, she'd said something about loneliness in the group. Presumably, she also felt sad about the bleakness of the heavenly court and underworld. The old people had left. The heavenly court and underworld were no longer as noisy as before. The entire heavenly palace was like a dead city. The number of female immortals had decreased by 50%, and the number of immortals with immortal positions had decreased by 70%. Practically no one lived in the immortal residences above the 12th layer. Could this heavenly palace really be considered a heavenly palace? Inexplicably, the Queen Mother shook her head and left the group. She looked at the heavenly court, which was still bathed in rosy light. She couldn't help but miss the days when the Great Sage and the others were still around and the heavenly court was in chaos. Let's go. They're all gone. She shook her head and sighed. Then she rode off on a cloud. How could she not feel lonely? Even the profound maiden of the 9 heavens had left. She looked around the entire heavenly palace, but there was no one she could confide in. Queen Mother of the West bitterness also caused the people who stayed in the group to let out mournful cries. The immortality Peach Fairy sighed as she watched her colleagues leave her side. The kitchen god mocked himself as he said what was the use of his skills. The barefoot immortal had also witnessed the rise and fall of the Red Packet server. He watched as the Red Packet server became a dead group. Everyone in the group sighed with regret. Yizichin couldn't help but frown as he read the messages. The spiritual energy of the 3 lower realms was too dense for them to increase their cultivation by such a large margin. Even Yizichin couldn't help but feel sad when he saw the desolation in the group. Their sudden increase in cultivation was naturally a good thing. Yizichin was happy for them. However, this sudden increase was too strange, and it severely affected the operations of the heavenly court and underworld. From the looks of it, this wasn't a good thing. Great sage, Yizichin comforted the deities in the group, then put his phone away and placed it on the table. He looked towards the great sage and asked him a question. The Queen Mother had said she'd asked someone to send the great sage down to take a look. Naturally, he knew what was going on. Did you find anything when you went down? To be honest, I didn't find anything special. The great sage sat upright on a chair and said, When I, old son, went down, God of thunder and mother of lightning were in the sky palace. However, their auras seemed to be on the verge of ascending. Almost all the old courtesans in the heavenly palace had disappeared. The ones in charge now, where he used to be the servant of an old courtesan. How dense is the spiritual energy there? Asked Yizichin. One of the factors that affected the advancement of one's realm was one's own talent and comprehension of the Taoist laws of heaven and earth. The second factor was the density of the surrounding spiritual energy. Between the two, the latter was far superior to the former. If he was in an environment where the spiritual energy was very thin, then even if his talent was monstrous, he would not be able to make rapid progress. But in a place with dense spiritual energy, even a newborn baby could become an immortal. It was more appropriate to say that even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice. Without spiritual energy, no matter how high one's talent was, it was useless. I don't feel any changes. The great sage rolled his eyes and thought for a while. The spiritual energy filtered by the ley line is still as pure as the divine mountains. It's not much more than the divine mountains. When I went down, I even went to Mount Huagua. In truth, the monkeys of Mount Huagua haven't decreased by much. Is that so? Yizichin narrowed his eyes. Mount Huagua was located in the endless beast region, in the same space as the heavenly court, the underworld, and the immortal region. Logically speaking, the people of the heavenly court, underworld, and immortal region absorbed the same spiritual energy as Mount Huagua. Countless immortals had ascended, but Mount Huagua hadn't changed at all. Did their cultivation increase greatly? Asked Yizichin. Not all. The great sage suddenly glared at him. Because of this, I even got angry with the 2 commanders who've been following me all this time. Why is it that everyone else's cultivation levels are rising, but the children of Mount Flower Fruit haven't changed at all? That's really strange. Yizichin rubbed his chin, then looked up at Yang Jian. Yang Jian, go tell the Ocean Empress about this. Also, notify the other emperors in the group. Tell them to keep an eye out for any of our old friends from the Divine Mountain or the Yao race who have ascended to their realms. Also, tell Sui Yun to keep an eye out for the lower realms. I'll notify Wei Jie and the others, and tell Upheaval to be on the lookout. All right, I'll make the arrangements right away. Yang Jian nodded and left the room. The great sage spoke up at that moment. The great sage spoke up. Let me tell you, the situation in the heavenly court and underworld is pretty bad. In truth, the heavenly court is a bit better off. The old courtesans all have servants. I went to the underworld and found that the management of the 18 layers of hell is lax, and their cultivations aren't high. Even with their cultivation, the ghosts of the 15th layer and below can intimidate them. As a result, the entire underworld is filled with the wailing of vengeful ghosts. I, old son, left 2 strands of monkey fur there to suppress them, but once they lose their effect, the underworld will return to how it was before. Also, there have been more and more vengeful souls entering the underworld recently. There were no infernal judges in hell, and the ghosts that had just ascended were unable to make a fair judgment as to how many levels they should be allowed to enter. The internal corruption is also very serious. Our old son personally saw a few little ghosts accept gifts from people. Evil and wicked people were directly put into the pool of reincarnation. Yi Zichen's expression darkened. He had never come into contact with the management of the underworld, but he could feel the severity of the underworld's problems from the great sage's words. The evil ghosts couldn't be suppressed, the internal corruption, and the management was broken. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva and the other ghost kings aren't here. Yi Zichen frowned. There's no such thing as a ghost king. When I, Lai Sun, went down, the highest realm in the underworld was a minor ghost king, a human immortal who hadn't even stepped into the sky immortal realm. I didn't see any of the other higher-ups, and it's the same for the heavenly court. However, the heavenly court still has the Queen Mother of the West, who can control the situation. Although the Queen Mother's cultivation is unfathomably high, she can't split herself into 2. Even if she wanted to manage the underworld, she couldn't. Easy, if things continue like this, the underworld and heavenly court really will fall apart. I understand now. In the end, it's all because of a lack of management. Pu Jingwan, who'd been silent all this time, suddenly spoke up. She'd been traveling the outside world for a long time, but as the saying goes, the onlooker sees the game more clearly than the person directly involved. Chapter 1587. They provide the underworld with management. When he saw Pu Jingwan's relaxed expression, Yi Zichen couldn't help but narrow his eyes, mulling over what she'd just said. Whether it was the heavenly palace or the underworld, their hundreds of thousands of years of history and inheritance made internal management incredibly complicated. Even heavenly soldiers and infernum soldiers who'd been there for thousands of years didn't understand much about internal management. If anyone else went there, they'd be even more flustered. Tell me more, said Yi Zichen. Why, no way. Didn't I make myself clear enough? Pu Jingwan's jaw dropped dramatically. She looked at Yi Zichen like he was an idiot and shook her head. I already said that the underworld and heavenly palace lack management, so we'll provide them with management. What else do you want me to say? But do you know their history? Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. Is this the time to worry about history? Pu Jingwan shrugged. The underworld and heavenly palace are about to collapse. The monkey also said that the underworld can't control those vengeful spirits. All we need to do is provide them with experts. That way, they'll be able to intimidate the evil ghosts. Also, find a judge. Wouldn't everything be resolved by sending someone with a righteous outlook to hell? And sending someone with a righteous outlook to hell? Yi Zichen and the great sage couldn't help but look at each other for a long while. None of them had considered such a simple principle. Ever since they'd learned that the underworld and heavenly palace were about to collapse, they'd been led astray. How could they manage them? The underworld and heavenly palace naturally had more ways than they could handle, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Their central hub was about to collapse, so they didn't need to pay attention to so many details. They could just send people to suppress them by force. Although this wasn't the best solution, it was the simplest and most effective. As for the specifics, don't you have a Queen Mother in your group? Once the dust settles, or at least stabilizes a bit, you can just send her to teach them. Pu Jingwan was worried that Yi Zichen wouldn't understand her, so she explained. Yi Zichen had no choice but to admit that Pu Jingwan's words were like a bucket of wisdom. Just like what she said, they would suppress the riots and internal corruption at the beginning, and then hand over the details to the Queen Mother to teach them. This was the best way to deal with the Queen Mother, who was working day by day, and the heavenly palace and the underworld. Of course, he also needed to get the approval of the Queen Mother to send people over. No matter what, the underworld and the heavenly palace were not under his jurisdiction. Even though he had the position of the chief steward of the heavenly palace before, The people he was going to send now were all his people. They'd all be in charge. It was no exaggeration to say that if this were to happen, the underworld and the heavenly palace could almost be said to have the surname Yi. He naturally had to get the Queen Mother's approval before he could do this. The problem was pressing, so Yi Zichen didn't hesitate. He immediately contacted the Queen Mother and sent her a message. As soon as the message was sent, the other party was typing in the chat box. Emperor Yi, how may I help you? A line of text appeared behind the Queen Mother's portrait. Yi Zichen organized his words, then explained Pu Jingwan's entire plan to the Queen Mother. After a while, the Queen Mother of the West did not reply to him. Looks like the Queen Mother is having a hard time making a decision. The great sage stretched out his head and looked at the chat box, which had yet to receive a reply. He sighed softly. If our people go over, although the paralysis of the underworld and the heavenly palace might ease up, would the heavenly palace and the underworld really be the same? The Queen Mother wants her to think about it. Our people will be in charge of the management, and she will become dispensable as a commander. I know that. Yi Zichen had already anticipated this outcome when he told the Queen Mother all this. The Mother of the West would naturally have second thoughts. The upheaval alliance had completely taken over the management of the heavenly palace and the underworld. All Yi Zichen had to do was wave his arm, and if he didn't completely control the heavenly palace and the underworld, he'd at least control 90% of them. Even though the heavenly palace and the underworld were in dire straits, she still needed to think about it. At this moment, the other party was typing again in the dialogue box. Not long after, Queen Mother Wang sent another message. Emperor Yi, please give me some time to consider. All right, Queen Mother of the West can give me an answer after you consider it. If there are any changes, please contact me immediately. I will come up with countermeasures immediately. That was the end of his conversation with the Queen Mother. Even so, Yi Zichen still managed to contact Wei Jie. He wanted Wei Jie to hurry up and pick out experts from the Upheaval Alliance with excellent characters, moral values, and cultivation levels between Sky Immortals and Immortal Kings. Regardless of whether the Queen Mother agreed or not, he had a plan ahead. If she rejected him, at most, he'd just have them return to their posts and continue their lives in the God Realm. If she agreed, he could transfer them to positions in the Underworld and Heavenly Palace as quickly as possible. That way, the Heavenly Palace and Underworld would start operating again. I can't get away right now. If possible, I really want to see what's going on. Why did so many of the Heavenly Palace and Underworld's management suddenly ascend? Yi Zichen sighed. With such a large-scale ascension, anyone who saw it would be able to sense that something was amiss, especially since they were all managers of the Heavenly Palace and Underworld. That's right. The Queen Mother had mentioned that quite a few experts from the Endless Beast region and Immortal region had ascended as well. If that was the case, could it be that everyone who'd ascended had come into contact with Yi Zichen? Those who had nothing to do with Yi Zichen, such as the great sage's descendants of Mount Huagua, hadn't experienced any sudden changes in their cultivation. Was someone pulling the strings behind the scenes? As soon as the thought occurred to him, Yi Zichen couldn't erase it from his mind. After all, even if they really did reach the point of ascension, they'd have half a year to prepare. During that time, the Heavenly Palace and Underworld Descenders would have more than enough time to pick someone to replace them. But the current ruler was the Queen Mother. It was more like she'd been forced to become the commander-in-chief of the three realms. The others hadn't made any arrangements, either. They'd just been forced to ascend to the upper three realms. What exactly was this person planning? Or perhaps it wasn't because of Yi Zichen at all. Did the mastermind simply want to plunge the lower three realms into chaos and cause them to lose experts? But if experts of that level existed, what was there in the lower three realms that was worth it? If so many people ascended, then even if he wanted the ley line, couldn't he just steal it? Even if the lower three realms had masters of the laws, they couldn't do anything to him. Chapter 1588. The Outside. Yang Jian's frantic expression made Yi Zichen and the others shudder involuntarily. The outside, he spoke of, naturally referred to the first era, which had already transcended. In the past, Yi Zichen had only interacted with the first era in secret. Zui Mo and Xiao Yumei were in charge of all resources, and the First Era had made it clear that they didn't want too many people to know about their relationship. But now, the outsiders had brazenly sought out the Northern Divine Mountain's Sea of Innocence. Are you sure they're really from the First Era? The outsiders' sudden visit forced Yi Zichen to be on high alert. No one could be certain that they weren't outsiders. They just said they were from the First Era, but in reality, they were plotting something else. They are indeed from the First Era, said Yang Jian confidently. I've already confirmed their identities. They're currently in the Sea of Innocence. Don't worry too much. Hurry up and come with me. Yi Zichen couldn't help but frown. Yang Jian had spent a lot of time in the outside, so he trusted Yang Jian's judgment. But this urgency had something happen to them. When he considered this, Yi Zichen put away his phone and turned to Yang Jian. Let's go take a look. The Sea of Innocence. Pitch-black figures floated above the boundless ocean. From the looks of it, there were at least 1 million of them. The Sea Emperor, Shui Yang, wielded the Sea God Scepter and stood in front of the city. Not long ago, he'd sensed the arrival of 1 million powerful auras, so he immediately stopped what he was doing and led the clan elders out of the palace. When he left the city, he saw a swarm of figures hovering in the sky like locusts. During this period of time, he had tried to inquire about the identity and intentions of the people who had come, but the people standing at the very front who seemed to be the leaders did not respond at all. Although they'd crossed the Sea of Innocence's boundaries, there were many of them, and many of them were experts. Before he fully understood their intentions, the Sea Emperor wouldn't act rashly. Besides, he had far too few people with him. He needed to send the clan's elite forces. At the same time, judging from their appearances, they weren't here to attack the Sea of Innocence. Even if they wanted to attack, they'd have to heal first. Yes, the people who had appeared in the Sea of Innocence were all heavily injured, and their auras were weak. Their leaders were providing the injured with healing pills. To be honest, if it weren't for their own realms, they would have died a long time ago with their injuries. Swish, swish, swish. The sound of swords piercing through the air rang out like rain. The people circling the sea sensed the incoming danger. They all stopped and looked in the direction of Without Embroiling City. At that moment, countless experts with surging auras flew over from Without Embroiling City. These people were the elites of Without Embroiling City's clans, as well as the experts of the Sacred Land's Shui family. Ocean Empress. Several Without Embroiling City family heads hurried to Shui Yang's side, their gazes grave as they stared at the experts of unknown origins. With just a slight probe, the faces of the patriarchs turned cold. The auras of these 1 million experts were all at the sovereign realm. However, their injuries were severe and their auras were somewhat weak. They couldn't help but be shocked. Just what kind of power could nurture so many experts? What had they gone through to inflict such severe injuries on millions of sovereigns? Family head, should we call more people over? Asked one of the Shui family's direct descendants. Even if they're injured, we might not necessarily be able to take advantage of them. Don't. Shui Yang shook his head. They don't seem like they're here to cause trouble. Ocean Empress, don't attack. They're on our side. At that moment, Yi Zichen, Yang Jian, the great sage, Pu Jingwan, and a few others flew over. The Shui family members were familiar with Yi Zichen, and the family heads of Without Embroiling City had heard of him as well. The Ocean Empress turned to look at him. Are these people here for alliance, head Yi? They're probably supremes. At that moment, Goddess Xixia ran over to the great sage's side from within the city. Yi Zichen glanced at them and smiled knowingly, then his expression froze. He stepped forward and nodded. They're probably here for me. Ocean Empress, tell the others to return. These people won't attack the Sea of Innocence. The Ocean Empress waved her hand, and the other factions and Shui family members who'd rushed over hurriedly returned to Without Embroiling City. Yi Zichen watched them leave, then walked over to the experts in the sea. I'm Yi Zichen. Who's in charge here? You're Yi Xing, Alliance head? As soon as Yi Zichen said that, the eyes of the strongest expert, the one-armed man, lit up. He instinctively wanted to say Master of the Stars, but when he saw Yi Zichen's frown, he remembered that this wasn't the First Era, and he couldn't reveal the third era's master of the stars, so he hurriedly changed his mind. Address him. Fortunately, he was quick-witted. Although this was the Ocean Empress's territory, there were too many people around. But there were too many eyes. No one could be sure that the Star-Lord wouldn't be teleported outside after being called out by him. Yi Zichen nodded, then glanced at the man's bleeding arm. He instantly appeared in front of him, sealed the acupoints around his arm, then took out a pill from his spatial ring and fed it to the man. Thank you for your concern, Alliance Head Yi. The one-armed expert grinned. These are just minor injuries. Please, Alliance Head Yi, find a place for my brothers to rest. Their injuries are far more serious than mine. Only then did Yi Zichen notice. Nearly 1 million rulers were present, and not a single one of them was unscathed. Some had broken arms, some were blind, some had broken legs, some had holes in their chests and abdomens. With a wave of his hand, Yi Zichen took out the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. The towering black tower towered over the sea. Let's go in. Jingwan, contact the Hermit Emperor and send some doctors over. Ocean Empress, lend me the city's current doctors as well. Have them enter the Yao Ceiling Pagoda as soon as possible. The outsiders' experts all entered the pagoda. Pu Jingwan and the Ocean Empress contacted the doctors, while Yi Zichen left the great sage to stand guard. Yi Zichen and Yang Jian followed them into the pagoda. 1 million experts sat cross-legged on the grassy plains of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Yi Zichen stared blankly at them. Thud! At that moment, the one-armed expert knelt to the ground. Star-Lord Yi, we've finally found you. Hurry up and get up. What exactly happened in the First Era? How did you get so badly injured? Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. The First Era is gone, cried the one-armed expert. Chapter 1589. The Misty Realm. In this luxurious palace, the young man on the throne rested his chin on his left hand. His fair and slender hand held an exquisite crystal goblet, swirling the bright red liquid in the goblet. There were also 6 maids standing beside him, either massaging his legs or massaging his shoulders. Lord Yale, a middle-aged man with a white beard, walked into the palace. After taking a few steps into the palace, he knelt on the ground, put his hands on his head, and gently kowtowed on the red-carpeted floor. He wore a purplish-red silk robe, and his golden eyes were filled with respect and devotion for this young man. The young man on the throne was Yale. As for the maid beside him, the maid sent by the war goddess was no longer serving him in the palace. Even though the middle-aged man had knelt and kowtowed for a while, Yale still acted as if he didn't see it. He shook the red liquid in his goblet, and his eyes kept on watching the liquid scraping against the wall of the goblet, slowly flowing down the wall and gathering in the liquid at the bottom of the goblet. After shaking it for a long time, he didn't taste the liquid in the goblet. Instead, he gently placed it on the tray in the hands of the maid beside him. You're back. A faint whisper came from all directions of the palace. Only then did the middle-aged man who was kowtowing on the ground raise his head to look at Yale, his eyes full of reverence. Yes, Lord Yale. What you're about to tell me will be a good result, right? Yale pursed his lips in a demonic smile. This subordinate isn't sure if it's a good result for Lord Yale. The middle-aged man on the ground hesitated for a moment, then licked his lips and pinched the corner of his clothes. According to your orders, the First Era has completely fallen. Everything related to the First Era had been destroyed, never to be found. Nothing remains. There are still some people inside who are stubbornly resisting, but they can't change the outcome of their destruction. You're quite efficient. Yale nodded. At least it sounds like good news. So, is there anything else you want to say? But the middle-aged man wanted to say something but stopped. Yale narrowed his eyes and smiled sinisterly. You should know that I hate it when people only say half of what they want to say. In an instant, the middle-aged man broke out in cold sweat uncontrollably. In just a few breaths of time, his purplish-red robe was already soaked in sweat. His hands also soaked the red blanket. The violent heartbeat was very clear in this quiet palace. Yale also silently looked at this middle-aged man. On account of your contribution in conquering the First Era, this king will consider it as you making amends for your mistakes and spare your life. Thank you, Lord Yale, for not killing me. The middle-aged man banged his head on the blanket. Yale's gaze suddenly turned cold. He raised his finger, and a strand of divine power fell in front of the middle-aged man. The pupils of the middle-aged man who was kowtowing suddenly shrank, and the head that was about to fall froze in mid-air. He stared at the finger-thick black hole in front of him. You've been with this king for the longest time. Don't tell me you still haven't figured out what this king likes and doesn't like. I'll spare your life, so continue to say what you need to say. Don't waste time on these things. You must know that your time is very precious, and so is this king's time. Yale stretched his neck and looked at the middle-aged man deeply. From a middle-aged man's eyes, it could be seen that he was completely immersed in fear, almost scared out of his wits. When Yale's voice fell, he leaned back on the chair again. He didn't dare to have the slightest hesitation. He swallowed a few mouthfuls of saliva and said, "However, the Star Master of the First Era appeared for some reason and sent their elites to the Third Era. There are about 1 million of them. I sent people to intercept them, but they didn't." "Oh, is that so?" Yale gently raised his eyebrows and smiled. "This is quite interesting. 1 million. What level of elites are they?" "Most of them are at the celestial level, and a few are at the supreme level." The middle-aged man hesitated, worried that Yale would blame him for this matter. He hurriedly said to remedy the situation, "Although these people ran to the First Era, they are all seriously injured. Even if they want to recover, they will leave behind chronic diseases. Their strength is not as good as before." "That's because you think too simply." Yale indifferently smiled, stretched his body, and motioned for the maids around him to move away. He snorted and said, "In the Third Era, there is a divine doctor. As long as people don't die, he can cure them. Moreover, think about it carefully. When the First Era was destroyed, did you get the resources of the First Era?" "I didn't get it." The middle-aged man's face turned serious. "If I got it, I would definitely offer it to you, Lord Yale. All right, I didn't say that you embezzled." Yale still had that evil smile on his face. His eyebrows were lowered as he gently looked at the misty realm outside the hall. "I'm just telling you that these resources are likely to have been transferred to the Third Era in advance. Or the resources are in the hands of one of the 1 million people who were sent out." The middle-aged man was stunned. "It seems that the First Era has completely given up resistance and wants to pin their hopes on the Third Era. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so desperate. It seems that they are very confident in the Third Era." Interesting. "Lord, it's all my fault." The middle-aged man hurriedly apologized. He thought that Yale was in a state of anger, but he didn't expect Yale to just smile and shake his head at him. "It has nothing to do with you." Even though Yale said it with a smile, he still felt a little grim in his heart. The First Era had existed in the world for too long. Its internal foundation could be said to be rich to the point that even he felt envious. If such resources were handed over to the Third Era, the overall strength of the Third Era would increase by several times. This would make it more difficult for them to attack the Third Era. However, Yale was somewhat glad that the First Era and Third Era had fused. After all, it was a game. It would only be interesting if there was some challenge and difficulty. If they had directly attacked the Third Era, wouldn't this long wait be too cheap? It was because it was too boring that he destroyed the Fiend clan when he ascended to the throne. After that, he waited until he was bored to death. With great difficulty, he was finally able to attack the Third Era. He hoped that the Third Era could properly entertain him and let him enjoy himself. Isn't this more fun? Just let the two eras fuse. This king can still destroy them without leaving a trace of their existence. Yale's eyes sank. At this moment, the middle-aged man also spoke. "Lord Yale, actually, this subordinate also captured a few people from the First Era." "What?" Chapter 1590. As soon as Yale's voice fell, the middle-aged man made a signal towards the outside of the palace. At the entrance of the palace, there were a few armored soldiers escorting 2 heavily injured people into the palace. At this time, their wounds were still gurgling with golden red blood. Their faces were covered in blood, making it difficult to distinguish their identities. "Yale, it's them." The middle-aged man glared at the two and said, "They're the left auxiliary star and the deputy auxiliary star." They were the ones who plotted to let those 1 million people leave, so this subordinate captured them and brought them back. Left auxiliary star, deputy auxiliary star. Yale nodded and said, "No wonder. They actually have golden blood in their bodies. It's a good thing that the first era was destroyed. If we let them continue to develop, perhaps even these Star Lords will become gods and overtake our great god race." How is that possible? With Sir Yale here, the god race can only become more and more glorious. Suppressing our god race in such a barbaric land is simply an idiot's ravings, the middle-aged man flattered. Yale had heard this kind of flattery too many times. Yale ignored the middle-aged man's words. In contrast, he was more interested in the two auxiliary stars of the first era. Yale. He was the representative of the new god race forces that had risen in the past 10,000 years. He loved war and was given the divine title of Heavenly Destruction God. He was ranked last among the 4 god kings. His ascension did not directly change the structure of the god race, but it did have a significant impact on the god race. For example, the destruction of the demon race. The god race and the demon race were completely independent of the world and were not bound by the restrictions of the epic. In the past, although there was friction between the two races, it was only a small-scale collision. The first thing Yale did after ascending to the throne was to completely eradicate his neighbor, making the demon race cease to exist and the demon dynasty's king disappear. The pleasure brought to him by war was like a drug that he could not extricate himself from. After that, he completely eradicated the surrounding small countries or incorporated them into the territory of the Protoss that he ruled. The war goddess was the commander of the countries that he took in during the war. The purge of the surrounding countries made him set his sights on the transcendental First Era. What he didn't expect was that the First Era actually brought him more enjoyment than the demon race and the surrounding small countries. From then on, he immersed himself in the joy of conquering the First Era. Although he had been paying attention to everything regarding the First Era, he had never seen anyone from the First Era, let alone the First Era's auxiliary stars. With a light snap of his fingers, 2 water balls suddenly appeared in front of the Minister of the Left, and the Minister of the Left, and the Minister of the Left. The water balls landed on their faces and washed away the blood on their faces. If Yizichin was here, he would definitely be shocked by their appearances. Inshang, Hanan. They were woken up by the cold water and happened to see Yale's curious face. "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm one of the 4 god kings of the god race, Yale. It's you." As soon as Inshang glared, the expert of the god clan behind him fiercely knocked him on the shoulder, forcing him to kneel on the ground. "Behave yourself. The one in front of you is Lord Yale, the god of destruction. It's you." Inshang kept shouting the same thing. His gaze was as if he wanted to eat Yale alive. "You're too disappointing." Inexplicably, Yale was disappointed. The land of the barbarians really is a land of the barbarians. Even the Lord of the Stars and the auxiliary stars are so tyrannical. How could such an era possibly transcend? It's truly incomprehensible. "Screw you," cursed Inshang. The master of the Shun clan who was pressing down on Inshang punched his abdomen, worsening the wound that was scratched by the beast. Golden red blood dripped down his wound and onto the red carpet. Strangely, the carpet didn't turn red. Instead, it absorbed the blood, making it look even more bewitching. "Barbarian, your vulgarity makes me no longer in the mood to talk to you. However, I'm kind and merciful. I'll give you a chance to live. Tell me." Before Yale could finish speaking, Inshang suddenly burst into laughter. His blood-stained teeth were so unruly that it was astonishing. He swung his arm and shoved the expert holding him aside. "Go home and ask your mother." In an instant, Inshang's eyes turned completely blood red. His skin was frighteningly red as well. "Just you wait. The Third Era will definitely flatten you. I'll be waiting for you down there." "Oh no, he's going to self-destruct," shouted the middle-aged man in the hall. The other experts rushed in front of Yale. Divine power surged and completely sealed the space around Inshang. At this moment, Inshang's eyes suddenly flashed with gentleness. "Zhuer, I've come for you." In an instant, the gentleness in his eyes was filled with madness. The divine power in his body became even more violent. Boom! The enormous divine power was completely confined in the space sealed by the experts. The energy produced by this level of self-destruction was astonishing. Even though there were several experts with condensed godheads, the sealed space still cracked due to the explosion. Oh no, he's also... At this moment, the experts suddenly realized that Han Nan was also looking at them with a cold smile. It seemed that he was on the verge of self-destruction. The experts had no time to seal the space around him. They saw Yale extend his hand and tap the area a few times. A vacuum space was immediately cut out. Another self-destruction. The two auxiliary stars of the first era chose to self-destruct in a few breaths of time after waking up. Energy constantly leaked out of the sealed vacuum space. Yale focused his gaze and grasped the space. He completely squeezed the divine power inside, forming a silver crystal that fell to the ground. The middle-aged man wanted to go up and check on Yale to see if he was injured. However, the moment he walked over, Yale kicked him away. "Lord Yale, why didn't you seal their panaceas before they came?" Why? This was Yale's first contact with the people of the First Era. He still had many things he wanted to know, but now he knew nothing. He was very angry. He was so angry that he wanted to kill this incompetent guy to vent his anger. "Lord, answer me." Yale's gaze was completely cold. The middle-aged man knelt on the ground and trembled. I didn't expect. Didn't expect? Yale suddenly laughed. He slapped down with his palm. Blood immediately flowed out of the middle-aged man's 7 orifices. He lay on the ground with his neck crooked. "You didn't expect this king to kill you, did you?" The rest of the people in the hall kept quiet out of fear. The middle-aged man who died had followed Yale for thousands of years. He killed him just like that. Everyone in the hall, whether it was the experts or the maids, knelt down. Yale calmly took the silver crystal left behind by Yin Shang and Han Nan's self-destruction. Wipe out the god race. This king is waiting. Chapter 1591. Attack the Third Era. The god race experts couldn't hide their astonishment. Although Yale hadn't been in power for long, he'd always meant what he said. If he said they were going to attack, they were going to attack. However, everyone knew that the Third Era hadn't reached its end yet. "Your Excellency, you mean? Haven't I made myself clear enough?" Yale's eyes narrowed. The god race experts, who'd just seen blood, instantly felt a chill run down their spines. They broke out in a cold sweat. "Your Excellency Yale, please calm down. We understand what you're saying, but time's not up yet." Yale's expression flashed with arrogance. "It's just a bunch of powerless masters of the laws who set the rules. It's one thing for them to use the rules to restrict those barbarians, but are we supposed to do the same? Pass on my orders. The entire army is to prepare to attack the Third Era. Anyone who dares to stand in our way will have to think twice about whether or not their heads are enough for me to chop off." "Yes, sir." The god race experts immediately obeyed and prepared to leave. However, the furious Yale called them back. Only the Minister of the Left and the Deputy Stars were captured, where the First Era's Master of the Stars, his fated star, and the other auxiliary stars. "They're fighting the war god," said the god race expert. "The war god went to the First Era too?" Yale smiled inexplicably and said, "All right, then leave the first epic to his people to play with. Let our people retreat. This king is already sick of the first epic's old bones. It's time to play with new prey." The god race experts transformed into streaks of light and disappeared from the hall. Yale clasped his hands behind his back and gazed off into the distance. "Don't disappoint me." With that, Yale clasped his hands behind his back and left. Only the maids remained. They stared at the middle-aged god race expert lying in a pool of his own blood. When they recalled what had happened, their hearts trembled. The First Era was destroyed. Yi Zichen and Yang Jian instantly froze in mid-air as the outsider's horse wails sobbed. When Yi Zichen first set out for the First Era, he learned that the First Era was at war. Through Han Nan's divine abilities, Yi Zichen could feel the ferocity of a primordial beast. However, at that time, the First Era was still relatively safe. There were only a few cracks in the defensive layer that resisted the attacks of the giant beasts. According to Han Nan, they couldn't defend against the beast's attacks forever, which was why they sought Yi Zichen's help. However, at the very least, this layer of defense could protect their era for 100 years. Not long ago, the Star-Lord had declared that he had not perished as Han Nan had said. What's more, the half-step transcendent Gu Li from the outside was helping them. But now, this alien expert said that the first era had been destroyed. That was a little too far-fetched. However, this was all Yi Zichen thought. Although he didn't want to believe them, he never doubted their veracity. The truth was in front of everyone. Nearly 1 million ruler rank experts had suffered grievous injuries. From this, it could be seen what kind of calamity the first era had experienced. Yi Zichen did not even dare to imagine such a scene, because it was too tragic. Then the first era's master of the stars, the fated stars, the auxiliary stars, and the others, said Yang Jian. The master of the stars, the fated stars, and the auxiliary stars are currently fighting the destroyers. The minister of the left and the assistant stars risked their lives to send us out of the first era. As for their exact situation, we don't know either. The outsider gnashed his teeth and clenched his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. The only thing we can be sure of is that the minister of the left and the assistant stars have already died in battle. Suddenly, 2 broken jade slips appeared in everyone's line of sight. Given Yi Zichen and Yang Jian's cultivation, they could sense that the slips contained a wisp of a soul. The jade slips' destruction meant that the person who'd condensed them had perished. The outsider's eyes were filled with hatred. He was undoubtedly hating his own helplessness. If only his cultivation had been just a bit higher, he could have stayed in the first era and fought alongside the Master of the Stars. He wouldn't have abandoned his home. Yi Zichen and Yang Jian fell silent. The fact that the Minister of the Left and the Assistant Stars had chosen to send them away was already a clear sign that they'd been utterly defeated. There was almost no way they could turn the tables. All they could do was send these people away. They'd leave a seed of hope for the first era. The first era had gone through 2 eras, but it still couldn't withstand the Terminator's attacks. In that case, what kind of opponent would the third era face in the near future? For a moment, Yi Zichen didn't even dare think about it. Even if he counted all the rulers of the upper 3 realms, could there be more than 100,000 of them? It would be very difficult. 1 million. There were nearly 1 million rulers here, but what had happened? They'd all been heavily injured and had no choice but to flee to the third era in search of a final ray of hope. As for the experts, the Divine Mountain's emperors were indeed powerful, but compared to the first era's master of the stars and Gu Li, could they really compare? No matter how he looked at it, Yi Zichen couldn't think of any way they could resist the Terminators. Why hadn't Yi Zichen said he'd send reinforcements after learning the first era had been destroyed? How could they? Given the third era's meager strength, how could they possibly save the first era from disaster? Right now, they couldn't even protect themselves. Seeing that the end of the third era was coming, they would have to face the same ancient behemoths as the first era and the infinite powers of the Terminators. Perhaps. The only possibility was that the third era hadn't transcended yet and had plenty of celestial fate. If Yi Zichen could transcend, the third era might have a chance at survival. Right? There was still a chance. Now wasn't the time to complain. The first era's destruction was a wake-up call for the third era. The Terminators. They weren't as easy to deal with as they'd imagined. In fact, they were far more difficult to deal with than they'd imagined. While they still had time, they had to seize every opportunity. They couldn't afford to slack off. Every second counted, even if they lost in the end. If the third era was destroyed by the Terminators, they had to at least try not to lose too badly. However, the worst thing about the third era was that the gods, Yao, and demons were still at war with each other. The God Emperor didn't do anything for the sake of his own selfish desires. The Demon Emperor was ambitious. Even if the third era ended, he still wanted to seize territory. The Yao Emperor was like a wild crane, unconcerned about anything. Chapter 1592. Yang Jian patted Yi Zichen's shoulder. He could tell that Yi Zichen's emotions were in a mess. Yi Zichen shook his head with a smile. He was indeed troubled, so troubled that he didn't know what to do. But before that, he had to find a place for the outer realm experts to stay, considering how heavily injured they were. One couldn't stay in the Yao Ceiling Pagoda for long. Only the Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda could stay here for a short period of time. But in the long run, the Yao Ceiling Pagoda would forcibly leave a mark on the host sea of consciousness and refine them into its servants. Everyone, I am deeply saddened by the destruction of the first era. But all you have come bearing hope, so don't be too sad. Stay here and heal your wounds. I'll find a place for you to stay. You can stay in the third era with peace of mind. We'll definitely take revenge for the destruction of the first era. It wasn't easy to find a place to house 1 million people. The interior of the Divine Mountain was already saturated. If they wanted to accommodate these millions of people, they would need to build a new city in a place that didn't have one. This was not something that could be done in a short period of time. No matter how great the task was, Yi Zichen couldn't just ignore them. Right when he was about to leave the tower to discuss the matter with the Ocean Sovereign, the expert from the outer domain stopped him. Star-Lord Yi, there's no need to trouble yourself. The Minister of the Left has already prepared a place for us to rest before we came. Ready? Yi Zichen was stunned. What do you mean? Don't you live in the third era? Of course we want to stay in the third era, but before we came, the Star-Lord obtained a divine mountain for us. This was an unforgettable day for the god, Yao, and demon races. Since the beginning of the era, there had been 9 divine mountains. The god race had not experienced any changes during this period, but on this day, the 10th divine mountain appeared. Countless powerhouses that had never appeared in the world appeared for the sake of this divine mountain. Everyone looked up at the 10th divine mountain, their eyes filled with unconcealable shock. The God Emperor, the Ocean Emperor, the Jade Lake Palace Master. A series of God race almighty beings landed on the outskirts of the divine mountain. However, these almighty beings were divided into countless factions. They gathered together to watch the newly born divine mountain until it completely stabilized. These great emperors also knew that the master of this sacred mountain was Yi Zichen. God Emperor, we found out that the divine mountain's master is Yi Zichen. The divine arbiter cupped her hands and stood next to the God Emperor. Beside her were 2 people with powerful auras. These 2 were the leaders of the 2 factions the God Emperor had spent a great deal of effort to nurture. As he listened, the divine emperor, Zhou Wu's expression darkened even more. He squinted. Zhou, the emperor said, Emperor Zhou Wu, the emperor Zhou, he, the Zhe they, and was the God Emperor merely nodded his head, flicked his sleeves, and left. The 2 great powers and the divine arbiter followed close behind. Zhou, Zhehi Zhao, China laughed. In the God race's 120 million years of history, 9 divine mountains is a foregone conclusion. But now, he's actually managed to create a 10th divine mountain. Zhou, just now, that Zhou, just that he Zhou exclamation point. There's something wrong with his head. What does the divine mountains have to do with him? Snorted the Bayan great emperor, who already disliked Zhou Wu. Yi, DV had his. Zhou, has his position ever stabilized? Empress Su Qingyan smirked. Hasn't he been under threat all this time? The way I see it, he's furious because Yi Zichen's divine mountain is even larger than his own. As the God Emperor, he feels humiliated. That's possible. Emperor Chao Feng nodded. A 10th divine mountain? I don't even dare think about it. As the crowd slandered Zhou Wu, the hermit emperor sighed and shook his head. What a magnificent sight. Do you think there's a chance another divine mountain will appear in the future? Su Mei hid herself in the clouds. As she watched the mountain, even larger and more majestic than the central divine mountain, her lips curved into a smile. She couldn't help but recall Yi Zichen's shocking words. At the time, even she found his thoughts too shocking. An additional divine mountain. How is that possible? Even after witnessing Yi Zichen's adventures, she'd never imagined a 10th divine mountain would appear. She really hadn't expected him to do it. Regardless of the mountain's origins, a 10th divine mountain had indeed appeared in the God realm. It stood in the northern part of the northern Divine Mountain. It felt a little isolated, but at the same time, it was like a crane among a flock of chickens. As expected of the man I've fallen for. Sume covered her mouth and smiled. Her smile was as beautiful as a flower, so beautiful that even the clouds around her seemed to disperse. Unfortunately, but no one was around to witness her beautiful smile. My lord, at that moment, an old man suddenly appeared by Sume-er's side. The Empress wishes for you to return. The Fox clan's god of life and Ice Breath's inheritors have already appeared. What's the point of me going back? Sume-er rolled her eyes. Tell the Empress that I'm busy and won't be returning. As she spoke, Sume-er continued to smile at the Divine Mountain. It was as if she could peer through the clouds and see the man of her dreams. Her eyes brimmed with tenderness and sweetness. The old man didn't say anything to disturb her. After a while, Sume-er stretched lazily and smiled. Is Zhou Wu still trying to recruit astral lords? Yes. Even though we've stopped quite a few, there are still quite a few astral lords who've fallen under Zhou Wu's command. At the end of the day, Zhou Wu is the God Emperor. Being able to work for the God Emperor is already a huge temptation. My lord, we're acting without a good reason. If we use force, who knows? The old man smiled bitterly. The title of the God Emperor is really useful, Sume-er said with a smile. I really want to take that title and play around with it. My lord, if you want, I'll give it to you even if I have to die. I'm just saying. Sume-er hurriedly waved her hands and laughed. Even if you gave me the title of God Emperor for free, I wouldn't want it. I can only say that those who have fallen under the God Emperor are stupid. When they die, they'll know just how stupid they are. My lord, you're right. Oh, right. Find some time to contact my good-for-nothing older brother. The God race is about to attack. We can't let him die in the chaos. I'll go. Oh, that's right. Even if you go, you won't be able to persuade him. Sume-er sighed and pursed her lips. Then she looked at the Divine Mountain below reluctantly. Little big brother, once I've settled everything, I'll definitely stick to you every day. We'll be together forever. Bye-bye. Chapter 1593. The 10th Divine Mountain. Yi Zichen stood in the air and looked down at the mountain. Even now, he still couldn't believe that the 10th Divine Mountain had just appeared in front of him. According to the outsider expert, this mountain was a place the first era's master of the stars had arranged for them to live in. It was also his way of returning the favor and gifting Yi Zichen the third era's Yi Zichen. To tell the truth, this gift was a bit excessive. It also allowed Yi Zichen to see just how powerful the first era's master of the stars was. He also learned that even with such divine abilities, the first era's master of the stars hadn't been able to stop the end of an era. It was obvious just how powerful the era terminator was. Yi, from now on, this divine mountain belongs to us, said Yang Jian as he soared into the sky. Yang Jian sighed and flew over. The great sage and Pu Jingwan flew over as well. They stood together, staring down at the divine mountain. This divine mountain was a bit larger than the central divine mountain, but there were millions of outsider experts, making it seem especially deserted. Star Lord Yi, we've taken care of everything. The outsider expert hurried over. Although this divine mountain had just been born in the third era, it was actually one of the first era's divine mountains. There were cities and residences on the divine mountain. The outsider experts could easily find a place to rest and recuperate in peace. You've worked hard. May I know your name? Yi Zichen cupped his hands respectfully. My name is Lang Qinghai. I was once the 9th elder under the first era's master of the stars. Brother Lang. Yi Zichen and the others nodded at him. Brother Lang, your injuries. It's no problem. Lang Qinghai smiled indifferently. In truth, his injuries were far more serious than the others, but as their commander, he had a few things he needed to explain to Yi Zichen. As such, he could only rely on his own strength to endure his injuries. He hadn't gone to treat them. These minor injuries are nothing. What's important is that my group of brothers are all heavily injured, and it will be very difficult for them to recover with just pills. I'll have to trouble Star Lord Yi to find more doctors for us. There are too many of them with injuries that cannot be delayed. Of course, please don't worry, Brother Lang. Yi Zichen nodded, then looked down at the majestic yet somewhat desolate Divine Mountain. Brother Lang, as you can see, this Divine Mountain is a bit too desolate, I wonder. Lang Qinghai said, "This sacred mountain is a gift from the Star Lord to you, and also a place for us brothers to go. If you want to bring your people to this Divine Mountain, we naturally won't refuse. Moreover, the war is imminent. If we are allies on the same Divine Mountain, we will not be able to help each other. We could take care of each other." Alliance, Yi Zichen chuckled. In truth, he just wanted to bring the Upheaval Alliance here. The Central Divine Mountain was Zhou Wu's territory. The Upheaval Alliance had been established to keep an eye on the Shao family. But not long ago, the Thunder Emperor clan had followed the Nine Li Holy Maiden to the Demon Realm. There was no point in keeping the Upheaval Alliance there. Furthermore, Zhou Wu had been eyeing the Upheaval Alliance and the Profound Pavilion like a tiger watching its prey. Just now, the Great Emperors had told him in the group chat that when Zhou Wu found out the 10th Divine Mountain belonged to Yi Zichen, his expression was especially unfriendly. The Upheaval Alliance had to be extremely careful on the Central Divine Mountain, so they might as well move their headquarters here. If the Profound Pavilion wanted to come, then this place was naturally even better. As for the other alliances, the Nine-Tailed Fox clan wasn't likely to move, and the other Great Emperors were all defending their own territories. There was no way they'd move their clans here. Fortunately, the Divine Mountain was large enough that it didn't hurt to give them some space. Great Sage, please contact Zixia Fairy and have them come here directly. Although this Divine Mountain isn't as safe as the Northern Divine Mountain, we'll always be here. Furthermore, the Divine Mountain is rich in resources. If Fairy Zixia and her clan get a good place to live, it'll be beneficial to them in the future. The Great Sage nodded. Even if Yi Zichen hadn't said anything, he would have told Fairy Zixia to come here anyway. Even if Fairy Zixia and the others were currently in without Embroiling City, the Great Sage would have preferred for them to stay right under his nose. Only then would he feel more at ease. As soon as he said that, Yi Zichen hesitated, then looked at Lang Qinghai. "Brother Lang, there's actually something I don't understand." "Go ahead, Star Lord Yi," said Lang Qinghai. "I'll tell you everything I know without holding anything back. You might not believe me, but even if we count the Third Era's rulers, including the gods, Yao, and demons, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for them to surpass 100,000. Emperor-level experts are even less than 1 in 100. Your first era had millions of rulers, but even with such a foundation, they couldn't withstand the final calamity. How about the Third Era?" In the end, Yi Zichen still asked. In truth, he didn't want to ask. However, this question lingered in his mind for a long time. He couldn't understand why the Master of the Outer Realms was so confident that the Third Era could transcend successfully. "That's what I wanted to tell you, Star Lord Yi." Hearing this, Lang Qinghai flipped his hand and took out a mustard seed bag. When he opened the bag, there were countless dazzling rings that flickered with brilliant light. "These are all the resources of our first era. There are a total of 6,000 space rings with the largest space." Wow! The money grubber Pu Jingwan's eyes lit up, and she began to pinch her fingers together. She couldn't help but mutter to herself, as if calculating the value of these resources. Yi Zichen and the others were completely stunned. All of the First Era's resources were here. "Brother Lang." Lang Qinghai placed the bag in Yi Zichen's hands and held it for him. "The Minister of the Left entrusted me with these resources. He said that the Master of the Stars said that I had to give them to you. You bear all of the First Era's hopes. This is the only thing we can do." Without waiting for Yi Zichen to speak, Lang Qinghai took out 2 more rings. In truth, the rulers you're looking at aren't actually that strong. They're all fairly talented diviners. As for why they became rulers in the first place, the answer is in these rings. Also, you've always wondered why the Master of the Stars bet on you. The secret lies in these 2 rings. They're inside. Lang Qinghai was just about to place the rings in Yi Zichen's hands when he noticed that Yi Zichen only had 1 arm. He casually placed the rings into the Great Sage's hands. The Master of the Stars also told me to remind you to reach an agreement with that person as soon as possible. Otherwise, there won't be enough time. Also, make good use of the time divine artifact the Master of the Stars sent you. Chapter 1594. In the preparation group. As Pu Jingwan and Yang Jian warmed up the crowd, all of the great emperors appeared in the chat group. The sovereign of numinous treasure and the mysterious stranger appeared as well. The group chat was all about Yi Zichen's 10th divine mountain. Never mind great emperors. The appearance of a divine mountain was a topic worth discussing, even to the gods, Yao, and demons. Jade Lake Palace Master. Alliance leader Yi is worthy of being the person my daughter likes. You really have strength. Lord 7. Alliance leader Yi is worthy of being the person that my precious little 17 cares about. You are indeed powerful. Fox Empress. Alliance leader Yi is indeed the person that our Lil Yin yearns for day and night. You are indeed powerful. Ocean Emperor. Alliance leader Yi. You're truly worthy of being my eldest daughter's lover. You're indeed capable. The Hermit Emperor. Elder San. Is this a family meeting of the bride's family? Lord of the Big Dipper. They're all good girls. Our Zichen is so lucky. Erling Shun. I really envy Yi Z. Monkey King. Erling Shun, just you wait. I've taken a screenshot. I'll send it to the third princess later. Erlang Shun. Monkey King don't. Monkey King. Call me Grandpa's son. Erlang Shun. Stupid monkey. You're asking for a beating. Little Grandaunt. Is it starting again? After interacting for so long, the great emperors in the group were used to seeing Yang Jian and the great sage bickering. The bride's family meeting lasted for a long time. The Big Dipper star, who seemed to have seen her future daughters-in-law, sent a big red packet in the group as a pre-wedding gift. The great emperors all praised the Lord of Big Dipper's generosity after receiving the gift. Then, the Hermit Emperor changed the topic. The Hermit Emperor. Why did little friend Yi notify us to look at the group? Why hasn't he appeared yet? Hermit Emperor. Big Dipper Star Lord. Does the Big Dipper Star Lord know about this? Star of Northern Dipper. I'm not sure. Invincible adorable beauty. Wait a moment, I'll call him over. Pu Jingwan left the group chat and sat by the window. She looked at Yi Zichen, who sat there like a statue. The great sovereigns are all here. We're just waiting for you. At that moment, a huge rumbling sound came from outside. Looking out, the great sage and Yang Jian were fighting in the sky. All right. After a long while, Yi Zichen, who was sitting in front of the table, finally replied. He picked up the phone he had placed on the table, but his gaze remained fixed on the piece of parchment in front of him. It was too shocking. At that moment, Yi Zichen's heart was filled with shock. After Lang Qinghai left, the great sage handed the 2 rings to Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen, who'd obtained all of the First Era's resources, was so shocked he couldn't speak. However, compared to all of the First Era's resources, he was more inclined to believe that 1,000,000 rulers and Master of the Stars were willing to bet on his secrets. When fighting against the Era Terminators in the future, the most important thing was still an expert. Divine artifacts, medicinal pills, and talismans were important, but they were only supplementary. Without enough experts to hold the line, no matter how many heaven-defying divine artifacts there were, if the user's realm was not high enough, it would be difficult to unleash their true power. Therefore, he did not look at how rich the resources in the thousands of rings were. Instead, he chose to open the 2 rings with the secret answers. The 2 rings didn't contain much space. At the very least, they were low-level spatial artifacts. There weren't many items inside, either. One of the rings contained a bottle of pills and a piece of parchment, while the other contained a set of blueprints. However, these few items had caused Yi Zichen to sit in front of the table for a full 6 hours. He was certain that if he publicized the secrets of these items, it wouldn't just be him. Even the great emperors would be just as shocked. Why are they fighting again? Yi Zichen glanced out the window. He didn't even need to think to know that Yang Jian and the great sage were fighting outside. Yi Zichen didn't pay too much attention to their grudge. He licked his lips, glanced at the parchment on the table, and clicked open the battle preparation group. Only idealism. I'm coming. Lord 7, what's up? Do you think we're not busy? Are you giving us the cold shoulder? Brothers, don't you think so? Jade Lake Palace Head. I'm not busy at all. Sea Emperor. The river Styx is very free. Lord Third. The Society of Saints is also very free. Hermit Emperor. The Hermit Palace. You understand. Cough. Great Emperor by nearly coughed up blood. Just a moment ago, the great emperors were discussing how to take Yi Zichen down a notch. From the looks of it, it was as if he'd been sold out. Lord Seven. Why, you guys. Even through the screen, Yi Zichen could sense Emperor Bai An's speechlessness. The other great emperors couldn't stop snickering. Yi Zichen had no idea what was going on between the great emperors, but he wasn't in the mood for gossip. He had to explain the contents of the parchment to the great emperors as soon as possible. Only idealism. Great emperors, please wait a moment. I have something to discuss with you. Jade Lake Palace Head. Do you want to talk about the 10th Divine Mountain? Hermit Emperor. Little friend Yi, you really are a miracle worker. Little Grand Aunt. That's all there is to it. Sea Emperor. Do you need us to provide you with a management plan? Only idealism. Thank you for your concern, great emperors. I have my own way of managing the Divine Mountains. Besides, there aren't many people in the Divine Mountains right now, so it's easy to manage them. Only idealism. If it's convenient, great emperors, you can move to my place. We can look out for each other. Emperor Hades, Yi, don't joke around. How can we leave? The other great emperors nodded in agreement. Yi Zichen knew this would happen, but he simply smiled knowingly. He didn't try to force them. Besides, he wanted to get to the bottom of the matter. Only idealism. It's fine if you don't want to come. Great emperors, please wait a moment. I'll send you a picture. As soon as he sent the message, Yi Zichen took a picture of the parchment. However, he only took a portion of it. He didn't take a picture of everything. It wasn't that he was afraid the great emperors would pry into the secrets of the parchment. They were allies, and there was nothing to hide. What he cared about was the stranger in the group. If his guess was right, this stranger was actually the one from the central Divine Mountain. Who knew what he was planning? Yi Zichen didn't dare take the risk. He could only send a portion for the great emperors to see. However, he believed that even if it was only a part of it, the great emperors would be dumbfounded after seeing it. Ding! A picture was sent. When the great emperors who hadn't yet arrived in the Yao and God realms saw Yi Zichen's picture, the group instantly fell deathly silent. Then, a flood of messages flooded the screen. Lord Seven, is this real or fake? Fox Empress, where did you get this? Is it real? Hermit Emperor, I've never seen this before. Lord Third, it's amazing. Little Grand Aunt, my heavens. Emperor Hades, this is too terrifying. Chapter 1595. Life. The emerald green light fell from the void like a spring rain, and everything in the world became even more vibrant the moment the light fell on them. Even though the outsiders ate pills and had the Hermit Palace's doctors treat their wounds, they didn't get much better. However, as the spring rain bathed them, their wounds began to heal. This is a miracle. Lang Qinghai stared blankly at the wound on his chest. As the spring rain bathed his body, he could clearly sense his cells brimming with vitality, as if they'd been reborn. He'd been using divine power to heal his wounds this entire time, but now he was completely relaxed and basking in the vigorous life force within him. Above the Divine Mountains, the Hermit Emperor, Ocean Emperor, and Xianji, who'd stayed behind as guests on Yi Zichen's Divine Mountain, were astonished. They'd long since known that life's Godhead's power was monstrous, but seeing it with their own eyes was a different kind of shock. Life's Godhead really is beyond our reach, said the Hermit Emperor. In terms of medical expertise, the Hermit Emperor was a saint. However, in the face of such large-scale injuries, no matter how experienced he was, he didn't have the strength to do anything. Yet the life god could heal everyone, and the effects were so obvious. No wonder the nine-tailed fox clan could subdue all Yao in the ancient times. Just this alone was enough to show them disdain. In a bit, I'll have to tell Qing Yan that we have to protect the girl who condensed the life god's godhead, said Xianji after a while. Yi Zichen told us that someone was behind the Terminator's attack, and that the aura-breaking beasts are being controlled by some unknown race. In that case, they'll definitely know what's going on here. The life god's godhead is a weapon of war. As they advance, they'll definitely make trouble for this girl. The Hermit Emperor and Ocean Emperor nodded in agreement. After discussing their preparations, Yi Zichen told them quite a bit of information they didn't already know. The aura-breaking beasts and their master were one of them. The second was that they'd heard about the First Era's destruction and knew that these rulers were all from the First Era. The radiance of life lasted for a full 4 hours. Although Su Yin wanted to hold on for a bit longer, she couldn't keep up with her divine power any longer. When the radiance dispersed, the Outer Realm experts were still longing for more as they savored the vitality that was about to emerge from their bodies. The moment Su Yin put down her scepter, Su Lu flew to her side to support her. I told you to stop a long time ago. Why are you trying so hard? You've only condensed your divine deity for a short period of time, yet you're already using your life force on such a large scale. Be careful not to harm your origin. They're all heroes who will stand at the front lines against the Terminus in the future. I'm just treating their wounds. What's so special about that? Su Yin smiled warmly, but her pale face made others feel pity for her. Su Yin, you've worked hard. At that moment, Yi Zichen arrived in front of her. Su Luer's gaze instantly turned unfriendly. Yi Zichen could sense it, but he could only smile wryly. It's all thanks to you. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to do. In response, Su Yin only smiled. She had exhausted too much of her godhead's power, so even speaking was a strenuous task for her. Of course, that didn't exclude the fact that she didn't want to talk to Yi Zichen in the first place. When he got no response, Yi Zichen awkwardly rubbed his nose. When Su Luer saw this, she waved her hand as if she were swatting a fly. Hurry up and go about your business. I'll take care of Lil Sis. Don't show up in front of us unless you have something important to do. Just looking at you makes me mad. All right. Yi Zichen rubbed his nose angrily again, then prepared to leave. Su Yin instinctively looked at him. Sensing her gaze, Yi Zichen turned his head, only to see that Su Yin had already turned away. All right. She's already gone, so stop pretending. Yi Zichen had long since landed around the outsider experts and was distributing pills. When he saw that Su Yin still hadn't turned her head, he couldn't help but speak up. I understand now. You're putting in so much effort for him, aren't you? You do know that these people are actually loyal to him, right? Su Yin was about to retort, but Su Luer reached out and stopped her. Don't bother explaining. I'm not an idiot, and you're no slouch. Forget me. Even if your big sister Zhu were here, she'd be able to tell what you're thinking. You say that you don't want to talk to him, but your heart has already betrayed you. Only that idiot naively thought that you were mad at him. Of course I'm mad at him, Su Yin said. Fine, I won't interfere in your affairs. The two of you have been doomed since your first life, and now it's still the same. Su Luer shook her head helplessly, then used her divine power to hold Su Yin back. Come back with me. You've used up too much energy. I won't even allow you to heal these guys for a while. Yes, he's already gone. Stop pretending. Yi Zichen was on the ground, distributing pills to the outsider experts. Suddenly, he heard a low, vigorous voice. He turned around and saw old Lord Taishang of the Heavenly Palace standing beside him. Yi Zichen cupped his hands in greeting. Old Lord, Yi Zichen had specifically asked the Jade Lake Palace Master to find old Lord Taishang from the northwest Divine Mountains. The contents of the parchment were actually a pill recipe. Yi Zichen didn't know any pill refiners on the Divine Mountains. The only person he could think of was old Lord Taishang, who descended from the Heavenly Palace. Although old Lord Taishang and Yi Zichen had gotten into quite a few fights at first, when he found out that Yi Zichen was looking for him, he didn't hesitate to rush to the 10th Divine Mountain to help. That girl is your sweetheart, isn't she? I feel like I have some recollection of her. The Moon Elder told me about your marriage, and you seem to have the deepest connection to her, laughed old Lord Taishang. You could say that. Yi Zichen smiled bitterly. As someone who's been through it, I'll tell you this. I don't know what happened between the two of you, but judging by the way she looked at you, I can tell that you're in her heart. Don't blame yourself too much. You'll definitely end up together. That's right, that old geezer, the Moon Elder, said that. Old Lord Taishang comforted him. Let fate take its course. Yi Zichen didn't say anything else. Given the current situation, I can't afford to get carried away. Besides, our misunderstanding. Forget it. Old Lord, you've seen the parchment, right? What do you think? Are you confident enough to refine it? Chapter 1596. Old Lord Taishang's expression was indescribably arrogant. Although he was just bragging, Yi Zichen wholeheartedly trusted his skill in pill refining. If he said he could refine it, Yi Zichen believed him. I need to refine this pill in large quantities. You should have seen it when you arrived. Almost all the alchemists in our Grand Alliance are here. I wonder if you can give them a chance to refine the pill. This, Old Lord Taishang's previously smug expression darkened, and he hesitated. Divine-grade pill refiners are proficient at refining pills. So long as I give them the recipe, they should be able to gain some enlightenment. If they don't understand something, I'll explain it to them. However, I'm afraid it'll be difficult to refine anything below divine grade. Don't underestimate this pill's refinement. Its ingredients are extremely expensive, but the refinement process is extremely complicated. However, the refining method is especially complicated. Without the experience of an experienced Taoist, it would be very difficult to control this pill. There are quite a few divine-grade and above pill refiners on the Divine Mountains. In truth, Yi Zichen knew a thing or two about pill refining. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been called Grandmaster Yi in the lower lands. He knew full well how difficult it was. At the very least, given his current level of skill, it would be difficult to comprehend its true essence. Yi Zichen had thought that 30% of the divine-grade pill refiners would be able to refine the pill. If Old Lord Taishang could get all the pill refiners above the divine grade to learn how to refine the pill, then it was already far beyond his expectations. That's enough. Yi Zichen's eyes flashed. Then he said, I'll have to trouble you to start refining now. I've already sent people to divide up the pill refining area within the Divine Mountains, and I've already prepared the furnaces and ingredients. I knew this would be a tough job. Kid, you really don't disappoint me, laughed Old Lord Taishang. You're right. The end of the era is imminent. We don't have much time left, said Yi Zichen. That's true. The end of the era concerns all of us. Never mind. Let these old bones of mine shine one last time. Old Lord Taishang's eyes narrowed. Then I'm off. Don't go to my place for the time being. Tell Hairy Monkey and Three-Eyed to behave. Refining pills requires absolute silence. I'll do my best to provide you with as many pills as I can. Sorry to trouble you. Yi Zichen respectfully sent Old Lord Taishang off, then handed over the task of distributing pills to the outsiders to the Upheaval Alliance members. By now, the Central Divine Mountain's Upheaval Alliance had moved to the new Divine Mountain, accompanied by a group of experts from the Profound Pavilion. During the retreat, there was actually a small incident. Just as the Upheaval Alliance and the Profound Pavilion were preparing to leave Heavenly God City, they were ambushed by a group of unknown people. However, along the way, an expert skilled in the great Tao of space came to their aid and safely escorted them out of the Central Divine Mountain. When Xiao Yumei and Hu Batzi told them about this, they couldn't help but fall in a deep thought. Those people of unknown origins who tried to kill him were probably from just a few forces. But to be able to act so brazenly under the God Emperor's nose in Heavenly God City without being checked by the people of the God Emperor's estate, this could only be possible with the God Emperor's permission. It was obvious that Zhou Wu had already decided to shed all pretense of cordiality. It was that expert who was proficient in the Tao of space. Yi Zichen and the other great emperors didn't say it out loud, but deep down, they all had their own guesses. Hermit Emperor, Ocean Emperor Annie. Yi Zichen stepped through the air and landed in front of the great emperors. They nodded at him. Then the Ocean Emperor said, Have you taken care of everything? Probably, but for the time being, I'll have to trouble you to find a divine-grade pill refiner or higher. Old Lord Taishang already told me that he's confident in getting a divine-grade pill refiner or higher to refine the pills on the parchment. The more divine-grade pill refiners we have, the more pills we can refine, and the better it'll be for us. Said Yi Zichen. No problem. The great emperors nodded. Yi Zichen continued. how are the geniuses of the divine mountains coming along? In truth, Yi Zichen was referring to the time divine artifact the outsiders had given him. The destruction of the First Era made it impossible for Yi Zichen to hide anything from the great emperors. After he told them about the destruction of the First Era, he revealed the existence of the time divine artifact. The requirements for selecting geniuses were strict. They had to be monstrously talented, born less than 1,000 years ago. This was the result of Yi Zichen's discussion with the great emperors. The time divine artifact was precious, and its interior space was limited. They couldn't just let everyone in. Those who'd been born too long ago had long since lost too much of their talent. If they still couldn't break through to ruler after tens of thousands of years, even if they cultivated for another 10,000 years, they'd find it difficult to achieve any substantial results. In that case, it was better to give this resource to monstrously talented geniuses who'd been born relatively recently, who knew, with this divine artifact, they might be able to produce a few more emperor-level experts in the Third Era. Bai-in, Qianling, and Qiao Feng are in charge of recruiting geniuses. Just now, they said in the group chat that they were on their way. They should be here soon. Before he'd even finished speaking, the sound of several sonic booms rang through the air. Up in the sky were 4 flying ships. Their pilots were Bai-in, Qiao Feng, the Jade Lake Palace Master, and the Lord of the Big Dipper, Yi Rong. "They're here as soon as you say they're here," laughed the Hermit Emperor. Each of the 4 flying ships held nearly 100,000 experts. Their auras varied from Earth Supremes to Diviners. These were all geniuses the great emperors had recruited from all over the world. These hundreds of thousands of geniuses carried the hopes of far too many people. Among them, Yi Zichen recognized quite a few familiar faces. Go Yuzhan, the Minister of the Right, Lori, Little White of the Sky Devourer clan, Zhuge Kongming of the Vermilion Bird clan, Xia Kiki of the Dragon clan. These were the people who'd always been by Yi Zichen's side. Now, they'd all appeared on the Divine Mountain. From this, it was clear that while the great emperors were searching for geniuses, the Yao, dragons, vermilion birds, and other races on good terms with the Fox clan had also been included in the alliance. However, the ones most worthy of Yi Zichen's and the Ocean Emperor's attention were the ones with the auras of rulers. They'd become rulers less than 1,000 years old. Anyone would want to take a second look at them. Yi Zichen looked in the direction of the rulers' auras and saw the 17th Highness of the Four Directions Palace, Lu Jing, and the 12th Highness, Cui 12, were all there. Among them was a white-robed, cold-faced young man who stood proudly at the front of the boat. He didn't look familiar at all. Beside him was a rather pleasant-looking young man with a pair of mischievous eyes. She seemed curious about everything, and she held a doll in her hands. Chapter 1597. Emperor-level rulers. At the very least, they needed to have perfected their Tao and condensed the Tao heart. Going from Earth Supreme to Diviner was already a hurdle, and Diviner to ruler was even more difficult. If one wanted to perfect their Tao and condense a Tao heart, they needed both talent and opportunity. There was no need to mention just how harsh the requirements were for the emperors to choose geniuses. Becoming a diviner in just 1,000 years was already shocking enough, and becoming a ruler was even more monstrous. However, even a monstrous existence was like the gap between a firefly and the moon in front of an emperor or ruler in 1,000 years. If it weren't for the girl and the icily arrogant youth, Lu Qing would have been the one they cared about and nurtured the most. However, the girl and the youth completely outshone her brilliance. Even though Lu Qing didn't care too much about it, geniuses always had their own pride. She had already noticed the girl and the youth before coming to the 10th Divine Mountain. She could clearly sense just how serious of a threat they posed to her. The girl was a divine general-level girl, so it was easier for Lu Qing to accept. The girl might look young, but for people at their level, appearance was no longer the only way to judge someone's age. Lu Qing had only ascended 100 years ago. Even if she was in the modern realm, she hadn't even been born for 200 years. Perhaps the girl was already 800 or 900 years old. Lu Qing asked herself if she was given enough time. She would definitely be able to beat the girl to a pulp. However, Even Lu Qing couldn't bring herself to care about the emperor-level youth at all. The few of them were sitting on two separate flying boats. Even so, when she first saw the young man, she could feel the young man's indomitable spirit. Even though Lu Qing's cultivation was slightly lower than his, she could guess that the Tao he had comprehended must be extremely domineering. Why is it them? He's here too? The Ocean Emperor and Xianji exclaimed at almost the same time. Lu Qing could clearly hear the two emperors' exclamations as well. She knew that the exclamations weren't directed at her, but at the girl and the youth. Although she didn't express her displeasure, Chui 12 could clearly sense the change in the aura of the 17th Highness, who was spoiled by an emperor and also came from the modern realm like a younger sister. Chui 12 couldn't help but shake his head with a wry smile. He was one of the few rulers among this group of prodigies. Logically speaking, he had ascended less than 1,000 years ago. Breaking through to the sovereign realm was something to be proud of. However, he knew very well that his existence could not be compared to those truly monstrous talents on the flying boat. Yi Zichen naturally sensed the two great emperors' astonishment, but before he could ask, the four flying ships landed on the ground. Smoke and dust flew everywhere. The few people on the ground subconsciously used their divine power to block the flying dust outside. Not long after, the few great emperors on the flying ship arrived in front of everyone. You guys sure took your time. The ocean's sovereign smiled. I told you to say that. You're enjoying yourselves on the divine mountains while we go out to recruit the geniuses of the world. It's one thing if you don't mention our hard work, but to think we're slow? Great Emperor Bian laughed. Then, he turned around and waved at Lu Qing. Lu Jing, who was standing on the flying vessel, walked over when she saw this. Chui 12 walked over as well. I'm sure you all know that little 17th Lu Qing is the youngest princess of the Four Directions Palace. It's been about 200 years since I brought her here. Great Emperor Bian introduced her. Less than 200 years, said Lu Qing. Normally, Lu Qing wouldn't have reacted this way. 200 years as a ruler was an absolute shock to anyone. Even among the emperors present, there were few who could break through to the sovereign realm in less than 200 years. She was only acting this way because of the youth and girl behind her. She didn't want them to look down on her. That's right. Less than 200 years, just a little over 100. Now that she's a ruler, she's reached the pinnacle of elemental fire. She's only a step away from condensing a Tao heart, said Great Emperor Bian. I've long since heard of Her Highness's peerless talent. As expected, seeing is believing, the Great Emperors chuckled. As for this one, this is Chui 12, the 12th Highness of the Four Directions Palace. Although he hasn't condensed the godhead yet, he's skilled in divination and is also a ruler. 12 greets the great emperors. Chui 12 cupped his hands respectfully. These people were rulers now, so they'd naturally be the ones they'd spend most of their resources on. The other great emperors introduced the other rulers one by one. When they mentioned Xia Kiki, they emphasized the importance the dragon race placed on her. The dragon god's expectations for her also raised the great emperor's expectations for her. However, the girl didn't seem to be as stubborn as Lu Qing. She ignored the great emperor's gazes and stuck to Yi Zichen's side the moment she arrived. This was just the first batch of geniuses selected. In the future, the great emperors would continue to search for more geniuses. There were a total of 10 rulers on the 4 flying boats. The great emperors were already quite satisfied with this number. However, the ones they cared most about were the girl with the doll and the cold-faced youth. Don't look at me like that. As if sensing the gazes of the great emperors, the young girl who was holding the doll that looked like a porcelain doll actually revealed a shy expression. She grabbed the doll and hid it behind the young man. The cold, arrogant youth paid no attention to the great emperor's gazes. He raised his head proudly, then calmly cupped his hands at the Ocean Emperor. Ocean Emperor, long time no see. The Ocean Emperor smiled and nodded. The great emperors seemed to know something, and they looked at the two of them awkwardly. Yi Zichen and the others frowned, wondering if this person knew the Ocean Emperor. However, the youth's next words left Yi Zichen, Pu Jingwan, and the others wide-eyed. I was careless the first time. If we fight again, you might not be my match. In an instant, The surrounding people were stunned. The surrounding air seemed to be frozen by the young man's words. The girl hiding behind him tugged at the youth's clothes. "Big bro," Annie said, "we had to be polite before we left." The youth ignored her. He continued to stare at the Ocean Emperor arrogantly, but before long, his gaze landed on Yizichin. This was an extremely irritating, scrutinizing gaze. Yizichin couldn't help but frown. This was too rude. Chapter 1598. This arrogant youth had become the star of this ceremony. As he spoke in a cold, arrogant tone, all the geniuses on the flying ships looked towards Yizichin. In truth, Yizichin was astonished. This was absolutely his first time meeting this youth. However, he could feel a strong hostility from him. "That's me." Yizichin nodded lightly, and the arrogant youth's aura instantly erupted. His surging divine power was like a pair of invisible hands reaching out to grab Yizichin. Wherever they passed, the space around them crumbled. The Tao heart of destruction. The great emperors instantly recognized the youth's Tao heart. This Tao heart could only be condensed after comprehending the great Tao of destruction to the extreme. Among the many great Taos, it was one of the most powerful offensive arts. The great Tao was difficult to comprehend, and condensing an ordinary Tao heart was already rare. This youth had condensed a Tao heart of destruction. The great emperors naturally viewed his talent as even greater. However, they had no time to celebrate or sigh in amazement. Everyone could tell that this youth wasn't just testing Yizichin, just as the great emperors were about to stop him. Whoosh, whoosh. Two figures, one black and one gold, instantly appeared by Yizichin's side. Black and gold light shot into the sky, instantly shattering the giant hands. "You're seeking death." The great sage wasn't particularly docile to begin with. He hefted his Rui Jingu Bang and attacked. Yang Jian did the same. The third eye between his brows opened, and the lance in his hand began to hum. Then, the great sage attacked the youth with a deadly blow. Oomph. In the face of two monarchs joining forces, the youth didn't show the slightest hint of fear. With a light tap of his finger, the space before him seemed to be sliced apart, turning into countless fist-sized cubes. "Big brother." The girl who was holding the doll in her hand shouted softly. The young man's disregard seemed to have made her a little angry. She bit her lip, stamped her foot, and spread her arms. She could actually see the flow of time. Time rewind. As soon as she said that, the surrounding great emperors lost their composure. The Tao of Time. Among the great Taos, the Tao of Time was ranked above the great Tao of Destruction. Comprehending the Tao of Time was already extremely difficult. Even great emperors like Shui Yang had only scratched the surface when researching the Tao of Time. They could only accelerate time slightly. Time rewind. What the girl had just shouted was to rewind time. Indeed, as soon as she finished speaking, the flow of time around them really did change. Regardless of whether it was the young man who destroyed space or the enraged great sage in Yang Jian, they all returned to their original positions. "What are you doing?" The young man glared at the girl angrily, and the girl stared back at him without showing any sign of weakness. "Annie told me to keep an eye on you before she left. If you don't listen, I'll tell Auntie." The youth snorted coldly and stopped attacking. The great sage and Yang Jian were furious, but Yizichin stopped them. However, in the youth's eyes, his actions didn't win him the slightest bit of favor. Instead, he mocked him. "Yizichin, seeing is believing. Before I got here, I was wondering what kind of person it would be, but it turns out to be nothing more than this. How disappointing." "Say that again." The great sage cursed. "Do you know who you're talking to?" Pu Jingwan also felt like the youth was being a bit too arrogant. "You're geniuses we recruited, and we provided you with all the resources you need. As soon as you arrived, you disrespected the Ocean Emperor, and now you're slandering Yizichin. How rude. Hurry up and tell him to scram." The youth furrowed his brows. "What? You want to fight me?" Pu Jingwan wasn't going to let him have his way. When she saw his expression change, she attacked first, blotting out the sky with her divine power. "Don't think you're better than others just because you're a genius. In my eyes, you're nothing but trash." The auxiliary stars of the outer realm had appraised Pu Jingwan as the strongest bounty hunter. Ever since she'd followed Yizichin to the Divine Mountains, she'd acted as if she were just playing around. She'd never used her full strength. But just now, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that she'd condensed at least 3 Dao hearts. The unruly youth's aura made it hard for him to breathe. Zhuge, Kongming, and the others, who were already on good terms with Yizichin, glared at the youth. Xiaqiki frowned and snorted. You think you're worthy of slandering my big brother, Zichin? Yeah, right? Why don't you take a good look in the mirror and see what you're made of? Snorted Little White. Bad guy. Lori wrinkled her nose and glared at her. In her eyes, Yi Zichin had given her candy, so he was a good person. Anyone who spoke ill of him was naturally a bad guy. I won't allow you to talk about my big brother like that. When the girl who'd stopped the youth from attacking saw him being scolded, she put her hands on her waist and shouted at the others. Ignore them. The youth ignored her mockery. He simply gazed deeply at Pu Jingwan, his eyes flashing with greed and adoration. The others didn't sense his gaze, but Pu Jingwan did. Perhaps because she was startled by his adoring gaze, she hurriedly retracted her aura and averted her gaze. However, the youth continued to glare at her. After a while, he finally retracted his gaze and looked directly at Yizichin. I've never wanted to enjoy your resources. I came here purely because I was curious about you, Yizichin, and because of the spatial divine artifact Great Emperor Chao Feng mentioned. It's just that after coming here, you, the one my auntie especially admires, Yizichin, you've truly disappointed me. You don't deserve to order me around, nor do you deserve to make me obey you. The youth's arrogance didn't diminish in the slightest. He stared coldly at Yizichin. If you think I've hurt your lowly pride, then I'll just leave. Even outside, I can still leave you in the dust. I'm not boasting. We'll just have to wait and see how things turn out. None of you. You don't deserve to be my opponent. I'm glad I came here in the first place. Suddenly, the youth's gaze landed on Pu Jingwan. Miss, may I know your name? This time, the other great emperors noticed his gaze as well. Pu Jingwan, who was being stared at, felt her body tremble. She couldn't help but avoid his gaze, but he didn't hesitate to say what he wanted to say. Chapter 1599. I've never seen someone so shameless. Pu Jingwan watched the arrogant youth leave with Xiao Yumei and couldn't help but curse. From the moment he'd looked at her, she'd already guessed this was a possibility. She just hadn't expected him to say it so brazenly. As for why he'd left with Xiao Yumei, he'd naturally stay behind. No matter how unruly he was, his words were repulsive. His talent and strength were something that no one could underestimate. Given his talent, if he had more time to cultivate in the divine artifact, no one could predict what heights he'd reach by the end of the era. In the future, he'd undoubtedly be a major force in the fight against the Terminators. It was normal for geniuses to have their own pride, which was why neither Yizichin nor the Ocean Emperor rebuked him. Instead, they considered the bigger picture and persuaded him to stay. The geniuses the 4 great emperors had brought with them all headed for the divine artifact. During this time, Xiao Yumei would use the divine power stored within the divine artifact to determine whether or not to absorb more geniuses. That was too terrifying. Someone actually likes Pu Jingwan? Monkey, look at me. I'm covered in goosebumps. That kid's probably blind. Not only is he blind, but his brain isn't working too well either. Yang Jian and the great sage were putting on a show. Yi Zichin looked back in bewilderment and saw Pu Jingwan glaring at them, her eyes spitting fire. Huh, can you say that again? Her hands were on her hips, and it looked like she'd attack them at the slightest provocation. The great sage and the others couldn't help but glance at each other. See, we said the wrong thing. Big sister Jingwan should be the type of girl who hates marriage. She's absolutely delighted to have someone confess to her. How dare we slander her future big sister's man? We've sinned. I agree. By now, Pu Jingwan was on the verge of exploding. The other great emperors looked at her strangely. Just now, even they were flabbergasted by the youth's confession. But in the eyes of quite a few people, this was a good match. Pu Jingwan was an emperor-level expert. She condensed almost 3 Dao hearts. The arrogant youth from before was shockingly talented. In the future, he wouldn't necessarily be any weaker than Pu Jingwan. The union of two emperor-level experts was unprecedented in all of the upper three realms. Of course, there had been such couples in the past. The Fox Empress Su Qingyan and the Five Elements Great Emperor, and the Sea Emperor and the Jade Lake Palace Master. However, of those two couples, one was separated by yin and yang, while the other was at odds with each other. If Pu Jingwan ended up with that youth, it would be a wonderful story for all of the three realms. I think the two of you want to die. Pu Jingwan clenched her fists and glanced at him. Seeing this, Yi Zichen couldn't help but feel a bit suspicious. You really like that guy? Who's interested in him? Pu Jingwan looked aggrieved. Someone like him isn't even fit to carry my shoes. Besides, don't you know who I've fallen for? Instantly, the great emperors stared at Yi Zichen and Pu Jingwan in disarray. The Lord of Seven Stars, Yi Rong, instantly transformed into a motherly figure. She rested her chin on her hand and nodded repeatedly at Pu Jingwan. However, as a mother-in-law, she was also a little troubled. This son of hers, wasn't he a bit too popular? When Yi Zichen heard that, he rubbed his nose angrily. Everyone's gaze made him feel even more pressured. He didn't dare linger on this topic with Pu Jingwan any longer. He gulped and coughed. Auntie, Ocean Emperor, who was at youth just now? It feels like you both know him, right? Especially you, Ocean Emperor. Have you fought him before? Coward. When she saw Yi Zichen change the subject, Pu Jingwan pouted angrily. Yi Zichen pretended he hadn't heard her slander. Xianji and the Ocean Emperor were clever people, so they followed his lead and changed the subject. However, when he mentioned that arrogant youth, their gazes grew somewhat strange. From time to time, they glanced at Great Emperor Chao Feng. We all know that youth. Or rather, aside from the Hermit Emperor and Rong Rong, we all know him. Actually, I know a thing or two about him, said the Hermit Emperor with a smile. You all know him? Yi Zichen furrowed his brows, then noticed the other Great Emperor's gazes land on Great Emperor Chao Feng. It's better to let Chao Feng explain why he's here. Xianji glanced at Chao Feng, then back at Yi Zichen. In truth, I mentioned this youth and that girl with the Tao of Time to you before, but I'm sure you didn't pay much attention to them. Mentioned them before? Yi Zichen's eyes narrowed in thought as he tried to recall when Xianji had mentioned such geniuses. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and raised his head to look at Great Emperor Chao Feng. When he sensed everyone's gazes, Chao Feng smiled helplessly. There's no point in saying too much. You all know this already, but I just need to confirm it for you. In that case, I can tell you that the sibling surnames are divine. As expected, Yi Zichen thought back to her conversation with Xianji. She'd indeed mentioned the siblings. She'd told the Divine Arbiter that her niece was a divine general-level expert, and her nephew was strong enough to fight the Ocean Emperor. If the Divine Arbiter's relatives were here, then that meant. As for the details, let me do it. Before Emperor Chao Feng's voice died away, an indifferent whisper suddenly appeared in the void. Everyone raised their heads and saw that a crack had suddenly appeared in the void. A woman in a white robe and a bamboo hat walked out of the crack. She looked like a god's attendant. The woman floated to the ground, even though no one had seen her face. But in the entire three realms, there was only one person who could achieve such a feat with his attainments in the Tao of Space. Divine Arbiter. Actually, I didn't want to tell you my identity. However, with the wisdom of the great emperors, you should be able to guess my identity from some clues. As she spoke, the woman took off her bamboo hat. Even if she stood next to Xianji and the others, her beauty would not pale in the slightest. Her delicate face was filled with indifference and some bitterness. Then, she took out a phone made by Zhua Mo from her pocket and tapped on the screen. Ding dong. The phones of the surrounding people all rang with a message notification. They took out their phones and opened the screen. It was a message from a stranger in the preparation group. Stranger, Divine Arbiter. Chapter 1600. By revealing her true form, the Divine Arbiter no longer posed any threat to the great emperors present. It was just as she'd said. In truth, the great emperors, including Yi Zichen, had all guessed that the stranger Emperor Chao Feng had pulled into the preparation group might be the divine arbiter. It was very difficult to hide a person's details, not to mention that she didn't do much to hide it. The Tao of Space was practically a hallmark of the divine arbiter, and she was in Heavenly God City. She was the only one who could think of this. Were you the one who helped the Upheaval Alliance retreat? Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. No, the divine arbiter flatly refused. The God Emperor wants to deal with you. As one of his subordinates, if I lend a hand and use the Tao of Space at that, the God Emperor will definitely suspect me. I'm not stupid enough to do such a thing and find trouble for myself. She wasn't the divine arbiter. Xiao Yumei had told Yi Zichen that they'd only managed to escape with the help of a spatial technique. Now that the divine arbiter had flatly denied her possibility, then, of course, it was someone I sent. I knew ahead of time that the God Emperor wanted to deal with you, so I secretly found someone to help you escape. You need to know that although the Tao of Space is a great Tao, it doesn't mean that I'm the only one in the God race who knows it. Putting everything else aside, the great emperors were more or less right. He has even comprehended the Tao of Space. It's just that he's not as proficient as I am. The other great monarchs nodded. All Taos are connected. Anyone who reached the pinnacle of the great Tao would do so in order to condense their Tao heart. When they encountered a bottleneck in their Tao, they would try to comprehend other great Taos to help them comprehend the great Tao they had previously comprehended. They did know a little about the Tao of Space, but just as the divine arbiter said, they weren't proficient in it. Mastering a single Tao art required too much experience. No one could master all 3,000 great Taos. It was better to specialize than to be proficient in a group. Even those who had just stepped into the ruler realm understood this principle. Then may I ask who helped you? Please tell me your name. I'll have a chance to thank you in the future, said Yi Zichen respectfully. It's my nephew, Godrain. In other words, the overly arrogant young man you saw just now. It's him. Whether it was Yi Zichen, the great sage, Yang Jian, Pu Jingwan, or the other great emperors, they were all stunned. The great Tao of destruction was already a domineering, peerless great Tao. Now, the divine arbiter said the youth was skilled in the great Tao of Space, and that he'd managed to sneak out of the profound pavilion and upheaval alliance right under the God Emperor's nose. A monster, a peerless monster. Even those who thought he was arrogant before had to reevaluate God's reign. He had become a martial emperor in 1,000 years and was proficient in the destruction great Tao and the space great Tao. This kind of talent was enough for him to not look anyone in the eye. Divine Reign is naturally proud and aloof. She treats everyone like this. However, he really does have a talent that matches his temper. In truth, he's not just skilled in the Tao of Space and destruction. He's also skilled in the great Tao of time. However, he's not as skilled as that Shirsha girl. He's still stuck in a time freeze phase. The divine arbiter dropped another bombshell. Play. Everyone gasped. Even the knowledgeable great emperors couldn't help but look at each other. Their eyes were filled with shock at Divine Reign and the Shun family. Needless to say, the divine arbiter was an emperor-level expert. She could stand on equal footing with the great emperors. Her family had many experts, and now she had a peerless genius skilled in 3 peerless great Taos, as well as a descendant skilled in the great Tao of time. It was impossible to imagine what the future would be like if someone like her stood by the God Emperor's side. But divine arbiter, are you really worthy of our trust? As the other great emperors gasped in shock, Xianji glared icily at the divine arbiter. The others might not know, but I do. What exactly is your relationship with Zhou Wu? I trust anyone who betrayed him, but you. I don't believe it. Xianji had served by Zhou Wu's side for tens of thousands of years, and so had the divine arbiter. As colleagues, they had to understand each other. Xianji was well aware that the divine arbiter's relationship with Zhou Wu wasn't simply that of a superior and subordinate. I've never thought about betraying him, said the divine arbiter suddenly. The great emperors knit their brows and looked at her. She'd already gone this far, but she still said she'd never thought about betraying him. What exactly was she thinking? I'm different from all of you. You're all standing against him. You hate him, but I don't. The divine arbiter glanced at the great emperors and Yi Zichen, then sighed. I'll always stand by his side. It's just that the things he's doing are too crazy, so crazy that I'm afraid. I don't want him to make another mistake. I don't want him to stray down the wrong path. I want to save him, but my power is limited. I have no way to sway his thoughts. I can't follow the demons. I have no choice but to work with you. I hope you'll consider my service to you, and when he truly reaches the point of no return, pull him back a little and spare his life." It couldn't be said that the divine arbiter's words were full of tears, but they were enough to move everyone. From her words, everyone could sense that she was a pitiful woman. She was powerless to help the man she loved, but she was still filled with love. No one knew what the God Emperor had done to make the divine arbiter act like this. They also knew that the divine arbiter, who loved the God Emperor so deeply, wouldn't tell anyone what he'd done. In the end, the divine arbiter was merely cooperating with them. They weren't allies who would advance or retreat together. That sounds like something you'd say. Xianji arched her brows, but her expression wasn't as cold as before. As a woman herself, she could sense the divine arbiter's emotions just now. She didn't seem to be lying. What she just said was exactly what she was thinking. Cooperating was naturally no problem. Having someone on the divine arbiter's level join them was a blessing for the Great Alliance. More importantly, they had to find a way to gain mutual trust. In the end, she loved the God Emperor too deeply. No one could guarantee that she wouldn't turn the tables on him. Or perhaps she'd risked her life to come here just to get the information the God Emperor wanted. I understand you very well. You've given your everything to the God Emperor. Now, his crazy behavior terrifies you. I feel sorry for you, and I sympathize with your situation. Xianji looked into the divine arbiter's eyes. But, in the end, you only have the God Emperor in your heart. How can we trust you? Just because of you? Two of your clan's geniuses are far from enough to be used as bargaining chips. They're too monstrous. Perhaps in the future, their existence will not be a bargaining chip for us, but a threat. All right, I'll put it this way. Chapter 1601. The fact that Yi Zichen was the Emperor's star wasn't a secret to the great emperors, but they'd never announced it to the public. Because of the divine arbiter's presence in the group, they all referred to him as Alliance Leader Yi. When he'd opened the Emperor's star's eye, they'd used Shui Tai to conceal Yi Zichen's identity as the Master of the Stars. No matter how you looked at it, it was perfect. Yet now, the divine arbiter was so certain that Yi Zichen was the Master of the Stars. Although everyone was shocked, they maintained their composure and didn't react. The divine arbiter couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh at the Emperor's disguises. You don't have to do this. Your plan back then might be able to fool those unintelligent fellows, but you can't fool me. I always knew that kid called Shui Tai was just a substitute you used to confuse everyone. The real Master of the Stars is, without a doubt, Yi Zichen. What do you want to say? Asked Xianji. I know full well that Yi Zichen is the Emperor's Star's master, but I still told the God Emperor that the chances of Shui Tai being the Emperor's Star were higher. Isn't that enough? The divine arbiter didn't avert her gaze in the slightest. What she said now was the truth. She had a clear conscience, so naturally, she would not be afraid. I have already proven my sincerity by helping you conceal the authenticity of the Emperor's Star. You should know that the God Emperor has been searching for the Emperor's Star all this time. The great emperors, including Yi Zichen and the others, all looked at the divine arbiter with various expressions. If everything was really as she said, then they would indeed owe her a huge favor. They absolutely didn't doubt the God Emperor's trust in the divine arbiter. If the divine arbiter said Yi Zichen was the Emperor's star, the God Emperor would attack him without hesitation. The divine arbiter's mist had saved them a great deal of trouble, but Xianji's expression remained grim. This wasn't like the divine arbiter she knew. Or rather, it wasn't like the divine arbiter she knew who was wholeheartedly devoted to the God Emperor. The divine arbiter was one of Zhou Wu's most trusted subordinates. Their relationship was that of superior and subordinate, but in private, they were lovers. The divine arbiter was unswervingly loyal to Zhou Wu. She did her best to complete all the missions he gave her, and she pursued them to the extreme. But why was she acting like this now? Just because what Zhou Wu did scared her, she hid it from him? What's in it for you? Asked Xianji. I still can't believe that you, the Divine Arbiter, would hide something from Zhou Wu and do something detrimental to him. I told you, I would never betray him. I was saving him. The Divine Arbiter suddenly turned her head and glared at Xianji. Everything he's doing right now is too crazy. Everything I'm doing is so that he can stay alive in the end, so that he can drag out his feeble existence. As for your trust, there's no need at all. With that, the Divine Arbiter's gaze landed on Yi Zichen. Since you are the Emperor's star, they will naturally follow your wishes. I'm just here to get a promise from you. What promise? Yi Zichen frowned. If Zhou Wu really goes astray and ends up falling into your hands, please spare his life for my sake. The Divine Arbiter's gaze was sincere. That's all I want. As long as you agree, I can give you all the information I know. As for you, you don't need to trust me. I don't need you to trust me. Silence. The Divine Arbiter's burning gaze made Yi Zichen hesitate. He could sense her true feelings, but he couldn't tell if she was telling the truth or not. Forget it. Just agree. To his surprise, while Yi Zichen was hesitating, Xianji's transmission appeared in his sea of consciousness. From the very beginning, Xianji had questioned the Divine Arbiter the most and suspected her the most. But in the end, the first person to make Yi Zichen agree was Xianji. When he heard Xianji's suggestion, Yi Zichen had already made up his mind. In truth, even if Xianji hadn't sent him a transmission, he would have most likely agreed anyway. However, Xianji's transmission made him even more certain. All right, I agree. As soon as Yi Zichen said this, the Divine Arbiter burst into tears of joy. Her eyes reddened, and she nodded repeatedly at Yi Zichen. She bit her lip and said, "Thank you. What exactly is Zhou Wu doing to make you like this?" The Jade Lake Palace Master couldn't help but ask, but the Divine Arbiter coldly refused. I'm sorry, I can't say. I told you, I will not betray him. The information I provide you in the future will never touch upon Zhou Wu's core secrets. After refusing the Jade Lake Palace Master, the Divine Arbiter smiled at Yi Zichen and nodded. I didn't come here for nothing. I'll leave God's reign and Shikachan to you. The two of them have been gifted with intelligence since they were young, and they will definitely not let you down in the future. I can't stay here for too long either. The God Emperor doesn't trust me as much as he did in the past. If I stay here for too long, I might be discovered by him. Farewell. The void above them shattered like a mirror, and the Divine Arbiter ducked into the crack, disappearing from everyone's sight. Even after she left, the great emperors remained silent for a long time. Zhao Qianhe was the first to speak. Don't you think what she said is contradictory? Little sister, you haven't experienced love between a man and a woman, so you won't understand. The Jade Lake Palace Master gently patted Zhao Qianhe's shoulder, her eyes filled with pity as she looked at the space that was about to recover. She is a pitiful woman. Not to mention that her words were contradictory. She was also sure that Mao was in her heart now. The shield is strong. I really don't know what great virtue Zhou Wu accumulated in his past life for the Divine Arbiter to be so hell-bent on him, said Great Emperor Baiyan. I'm rather curious as to what exactly Zhou Wu is up to, said the Ocean Emperor. The other great emperors nodded in agreement. They were all curious as to what exactly Zhou Wu was plotting to make the Divine Arbiter so afraid. All right, don't pay too much attention to this, said Xianji. In the future, with news of the Divine Arbiter, our situation will improve a bit. Whatever Zhou Wu is up to, we'll just have to deal with it as it comes. The current situation doesn't allow us to waste too much energy on him. We can't afford to waste too much energy on him. With that, Xianji looked at Yi Zichen. Now that the Divine Arbiter knows you're the Emperor's star, you have to be even more careful in the future. I'll finish refining your soul Pearly Yuan in the near future, then return it to you. I've been delaying it for so long because I've been researching how to preserve its memories. The geniuses have come looking for you. Chapter 1602. The Venerable of Numinous Treasure sat cross-legged with a stalk of grass in his mouth, but his body didn't touch the ground. He was still a certain distance from it. He cocked his head and looked at Yi Zichen. Yang Jian, the great sage, and Pu Jingwan were surely by his side. After all this time, they'd long since become inseparable. What's he mumbling about? I'm very busy. Big bro, just behave yourself. If big sister Xiang finds you, will you be happy? Reminded Yang Jian. When he thought of Xianyuan Xiang, the venerable of numinous treasure couldn't help but shudder. He rubbed his nose and said, Then what on earth is he doing? It's already been an hour. Maybe he's contacting the Queen Mother. The great sage glanced at him. Before coming here, you said the Queen Mother was looking for him. You might not know who she is, right? I have no choice but to tell you the story of how I wreaked havoc in the heavenly court. Just shut up. In the end, Rulai still suppressed him beneath the 5 Elements mountain, sneered Yang Jian. Looking for trouble? The great sage's eyes widened. Can't you two just calm down for a bit? I'm getting tired of watching you two bicker every day. Pu Jingwan was speechless. In the blink of an eye, the great sage and Yang Jian were allies. Aya, let's be careful. If Jingwan gets upset and goes looking for the divine rain, we won't be able to beat her. I know, right? She's proficient in the 3 great Taos. I'm afraid, so long as Yang Jian and the great sage were around, it wouldn't be too quiet. Although they kept pestering Yi Zichen, he pretended not to hear them. He was completely absorbed in his conversation with the Queen Mother. They were currently on the northern Divine Mountain. Xianji had asked Yi Zichen what his plans were, and he'd said he had too many plans. Coming to the northern Divine Mountain to see the Demon Emperor was his first priority. However, on the way, he received a letter from the Queen Mother regarding his previous proposal to transfer management to the Heavenly Palace and Underworld. The Queen Mother had agreed. Without any hesitation, he contacted Wei Jie and told him to send the management to the lower realms through Xianji or one of the other emperors. When the time came, the Queen Mother would naturally send someone to pick them up. However, after arriving at the northern Divine Mountain, she found him again. That was why the venerable one of numinous treasures had to wait for an hour. Only idealism. The spiritual power in the Heavenly Palace has been fluctuating a lot lately. Queen Mother of the West. It started 3 days ago, but I just felt it. It was Wu Gang who told me that it started 3 days ago. He has been cutting trees in the Moon Palace, so he can feel the movement of the tree very clearly. Only idealism. What kind of fluctuation is this? Queen Mother of the West. This is hard to describe. However, if you look carefully with your naked eye, you can clearly see that there are ripples in the void space. Queen Mother of the West. I think this ripple might be related to the ascension of so many people from the Heavenly Palace, Underworld, and Immortal Region. Idealism. I don't rule out that possibility. In truth, given the circumstances, Yi Zichen should have immediately descended to investigate. However, he had to deal with the old Demon Emperor first before heading down. In his plan, he would go to the lower world after the old Demon Emperor. It was just that the news given by the Queen Mother was too sudden. There was actually a strange energy fluctuation in the lower realm recently. Only idealism. Don't worry, Queen Mother of the West. I'll send someone over to investigate. I still have some important matters to take care of. Once I'm done, I'll head over myself and investigate. Queen Mother of the West. Thank you, Emperor Yi. Only idealism. It's no problem. I've already sent someone to manage them. Just send someone to pick them up. They're all members of the Upheaval Alliance. All you need to do is ask if they're from the Upheaval Alliance and confirm. Queen Mother, all right. Since Emperor Yi has important matters to attend to, I won't disturb you any longer. Queen Mother, if you can find the profound maiden of the 9 heavens, tell her to tell me she's safe. She's lived by my side since she was a child. She's like a daughter to me. I miss her so much that she suddenly ascended. Only idealism, no problem. So long as I can find a profound maiden of the 9 heavens, I'll have her contact you. Yi Zichen's conversation with the Queen Mother ended here. He closed the chat window and contacted Xiao Yumei. He told her to send a ruler or above to the lower 3 realms to investigate the spiritual fluctuations. Then he contacted Wei Jie and increased the search for ascenders from the Heavenly Palace, Underworld, Immortal Region, and Endless Beast Region. Once he'd taken care of everything, he put his phone back in his pocket. Only then did he realize that Pu Jingwan was chasing Yang Jian and the great sage around in circles. Ever since Pu Jingwan confessed her love for him, Yang Jian and the great sage had formed a rare alliance. They shared a common hatred for Pu Jingwan, and they'd teased her every now and then. Alliance head ye, are you done with your work? The venerable of numinous treasure, who'd just slandered Yi Zichen for wasting time, no longer looked impatient. Instead, he smiled obsequiously and approached Yi Zichen. I've delayed you, venerable. Yi Zichen cupped his hands respectfully. It's no problem. I've lived for far too long. Even 100 years or 1,000 years pass by in the blink of an eye. Your business is far more important. Waiting for me isn't a big deal at all. The venerable of numinous treasure's expression had changed completely. He smiled warmly, and Yi Zichen nodded kindly. Yi Zichen nodded, then frowned at Pu Jingwan and the others. Stop messing around. Big Sister Pu, don't chase after them. Yizi's looking for us. Yang Jian and the great sage yelled as they ran up to Yi Zichen. Pu Jingwan chased after them angrily and raised her hand, but Yi Zichen stopped her. All right, don't bother with them. It's not like you don't know what their personalities are like. Suddenly, Pu Jingwan's face reddened. Let go. Only then did Yi Zichen realize that he was holding Pu Jingwan's hand. Come to think of it, this was the first time he'd ever consciously reached out to grab her. He thought back to the way Pu Jingwan had looked at him that day, and what she'd said. Yi Zichen hurriedly let go, coughed, then cupped his hands at the venerable of numinous treasure. Venerable, let's go in. Have you thought it through? The venerable of numinous treasure asked. They were currently in front of the Shui family's dungeons. The venerable of numinous treasure had been stationed here this entire time to keep an eye on the demon emperor on the 3rd floor. Before Yi Zichen and the others arrived, the demon emperor was still in a bad mood. The venerable of numinous treasure had already told Yi Zichen exactly what was going on inside, but he still insisted on going in. I've thought it through. Yi Zichen nodded. Chapter 1603. He didn't have much time to waste. The closer they got to the end of the era, the more things, both big and small, appeared around them. Even though Yi Zichen was busy dealing with all sorts of trivial matters, he still felt overwhelmed. For a moment, he was somewhat envious of the great sage, who'd created 10,000-year-old monkeys with a single breath of immortal energy. He was also envious of the Ocean Emperor, who'd separated her divine nascent soul and created an independent clone to help her out. Yi Zichen couldn't do it. He could only rely on himself. The news of the Queen Mother of the West made him a little more worried about the situation in the lower realm. He needed to solve the problem of the old Devil Emperor as soon as possible. After that, he rushed to the lower realm to find out the reason for the abnormal spirit power fluctuations there. They stepped into the Shui family's dungeons. As soon as they entered the dungeon, Yi Zichen and the others sensed a heavy, oppressive aura. It was as if a primordial beast was staring at them. Their bodies involuntarily went on high alert, and all the hairs on their bodies seemed to grow sensitive. The diviners locked up on the 1st floor of the dungeon were all terrified and cowering in a corner of the light barrier. When they saw Yi Zichen and Yi Zichen enter, a few of them crawled over and begged to leave the dungeon. They'd had enough. In the past, life in the Shui family's dungeons had been quite pleasant. Although they'd been restricted, their divine cores hadn't been sealed. They could focus on breaking through their previous shackles and communicate with each other. Quite a few of them had grown stronger than they'd ever imagined. But in the past 6 months, the divine power in the dungeons had grown chaotic. Every so often, they would feel a surging aura coming from below. Even with their cultivation levels, when faced with such violent pressure, they could not even muster the slightest desire to resist. Their entire bodies were wrapped in an invisible fear. There was no physical torture, but the mental torture was even more torturous for them. The venerable Lord of Lingbao had a rare look of pity on his face as he looked at the prisoners in the dungeon, who were on the verge of going crazy. He was someone who'd endured the Demon Emperor's most direct aura for many years. This sort of pressure naturally didn't affect him at all. Even the great sage, Pu Jingwan, Yang Jian, and Yi Zichen could ignore it. But to these prisoners who'd yet to become rulers, it was like a poisonous bug eating away at their minds. Poor things. Sighing softly, The venerable of Lingbao walked up to a few of them. He stretched out his finger, and the prisoner, who was kneeling on the ground and trembling with saliva dripping out of his mouth, fell to the ground. There was no sign of life left in him. You were killed by him. Yi Zichen and company looked at him in shock. The Lord of Numinous Treasure didn't deny it. This person is already beyond saving. Killing him is actually freeing him. But this is the sea of innocence. Those clans might come knocking on our door. What does it have to do with me? Venerable Lingbao snorted indifferently. He didn't expect that these experts, who once cherished their lives, would ask for a quick death after seeing Venerable Lingbao give those people a quick death. When they saw this, Yi Zichen and the others couldn't help but pale. These people were actually asking for death. Did you see that? Mental torture is sometimes more unbearable than physical torture. Most of these people are on the verge of collapse, but in the face of death, they still need some courage or help. The Lord of Numinous Treasure looked sympathetically at the prisoners and shook his head. Go down. I hope you'll be able to communicate with that old geezer down there. That'll save these people's lives. Yi Zichen had only taken half a step into the second floor when an aura 10 times stronger than the pressure of the first floor washed over him. Yang Jian, the great sage, and Pu Jingwan stood in a triangle. They used their divine power to create a space around Yi Zichen, protecting him from the corrosive pressure. The Lord of Numinous Treasure waved his sleeves, and ripples visible to the naked eye emanated from them. The pressure in the surroundings was actually driven elsewhere by the ripples he sent out. Looking at the experts on the second floor of the dungeon, whether they were demons, goblins, or gods, all of them had a common enemy at this time. They were clenching their teeth to resist the erosion of the old demon emperor's aura. In contrast to the chaos of the first floor, they only wanted to die. The people here had a stronger desire to live, and they were keenly aware of the importance of the sea of consciousness to cultivators. Everyone arrived at the entrance to the third floor in a few steps. Before they could step down, a violent aura erupted from the entrance. Faced with this aura, even Yang Jian, Pu Jingwan, and Pu Jingwan couldn't help but take a few steps back. After steadying themselves, they stared at the entrance in terror. The entrance was blood red. What greeted them was a blood-red mist. Within it, they could almost make out a pair of blood-red eyes, glinting with eerie blue light. It was like a vicious beast staring down at them from the depths of hell. Even the great sage, who feared nothing in heaven or earth, couldn't help but gulp. Yao scram! At that moment, a deafening roar reverberated from the third floor. The entire dungeon seemed to tremble violently under this roar. Gravel and dust constantly fell from the ceiling. Even more shocking, the great sage, who'd been resisting the roar, suddenly sprayed blood from his nose and mouth. As if he'd been struck by a sledgehammer, he slammed into a wall 100 meters away. Monkey! Yang Jian and Yi Zichen ran over, but the great sage's heavy injuries shattered their iron triangle. Yi Zichen, who'd sensed the demon emperor's aura, instantly knelt to the ground. Yi Yang Jian was stuck between the great sage and Yi Zichen. For a moment, he didn't know where to go. At that moment, a cool breeze blew past, and gentle divine power enveloped Yi Zichen. The venerable of Numinous Treasure landed by his side. I almost forgot. That old geezer hates Yao the most. You stay here and take care of my good brother. I'll take the old geezer down there. Can I trust you? At the end of the day, the venerable of Numinous Treasure hadn't been with them for long. Yang Jian was worried he betrayed them. This is too disappointing. Even now, you still don't trust me? The venerable of Numinous Treasure shook his head. Then why don't you take him down with you? Do you think you can withstand that old geezer's rage? Stay here and take care of my brother. Hurry up and take him out of this dungeon. Take care of his injuries. I still look forward to the day when we can steal from the myriad realms. Yang Jian, Jingwan, you two stay here and take care of the great sage, said Yi Zichen. If the venerable of Numinous Treasure really wanted to deal with him, he would have done so long ago. Given his cultivation, there was no need for him to worry about Yang Jian and the others. Besides, the great sage was gravely injured. If you dare harm Ez, I won't forgive you for the rest of my life." Yang Jian glared viciously at the venerable of numinous treasure, then carried the great sage away. Pu Jingwan glanced solemnly at Yi Zichen's position, then bit her lip and left the second floor. That's more like it. Chapter 1604. Only now did he realize that there were 1,000 steps leading to the third floor of the dungeon. Yi Zichen could feel the aura grow stronger with each step he took. Even with the Lord of Numinous Treasure's protection, Yi Zichen couldn't help but frown. Red weapons filled the entire path. The Venerable of Lingbao was indifferent at first, but his brows became more and more solemn. Come to think of it, even with his cultivation level, he still felt a great deal of pressure. This old man, the aura of the old demon emperor, was like the waves of the sea, one after another, until... Scram! The Venerable of Numinous Treasure released his anger from the end of the passageway. He waved his hand and pulled Yi Zichen behind him, while a huge golden bell emerged from between his eyebrows and enveloped both of them. The inside of the golden bell was pitch black. After a long while, some light appeared inside the golden bell. You scared me to death. The Venerable of Lingbao, who was sitting in the corner of the golden bell, could not help but gasp. He looked down at the passage of the dungeon. Venerable One, we almost died here just now, you know. The Venerable of Lingbao rolled his eyes and said, I didn't expect this old man to be so fierce. If I hadn't been vigilant. The Lord of Numinous Treasure patted his chest in fear. Yi Zichen, who was under his protection, had no idea what had happened, nor did he know what the old demon emperor had done to scare the Lord of Numinous Treasure like that. However, he sized up this golden bell. If there was no accident, this golden bell should be the tortoiseshell that the great emperors were talking about. Then, can we still go down? When Yi Zichen saw that even the Venerable of Numinous Treasure was forced to take out his natal divine artifact, he furrowed his brows and asked, You still want to go down? The Venerable of Lingbao stared at him for a long time. I'm afraid you've lost your mind. I've already taken out my divine weapon, and you still want to go down? Then I can't get out. The Lord of Numinous Treasure glared at Yi Zichen, as if he had lost his temper. Why did I agree to bring you here? Great, now we're both trapped here. He remained silent for an entire hour. The Venerable of Lingbao, who seemed to be restless, suddenly stood up and opened a window on the wall of the golden bell. Hey, old man, why is your temper so bad recently? Scram! Even in the golden bell, the Venerable of Lingbao could still feel the rage of the old demon emperor. He twisted his neck, frowned, covered his ears, and shouted. Don't shout, it makes your voice sound too loud. The old demon emperor fell silent for a moment, but he soon shouted angrily again. Trifling, treasure-devouring toad, you dare to act like this in front of me? You're looking to die. You're going to scare me to death. If you have the guts, then come out and hit me. The Venerable of Lingbao stood in the golden bell like a monkey jumping on a horse. He could not help but twitch his mouth with a rich expression. Who are you trying to scare when you can't even get out? I advise you to hurry up with your recruitment. I'll bring a little brother to see you and tell you. Nonsense. Silence. Hearing no response from the old demon emperor, the Venerable of Lingbao frowned and touched his chin. We're over there. Then, before Yi Zichen and the others could leave, you old geezer, you're playing dirty. The Venerable of Lingbao quickly put down the golden bell, then put his hands on his waist. He did not know whether the old demon emperor could see him, but he glared outside the window for 100 breaths of time. The old demon emperor did not respond at all. Perhaps the Venerable of Lingbao was getting tired of it. Old geezer, just what you want. This little brother beside me is no ordinary person. He just wants to chat with you. We've been neighbors for so many years. You have to at least give me some face. He can come, but you can't. The old demon emperor suddenly spoke up. Yi Zichen, who had been silent all along, instantly shrugged. He tilted his head and looked towards the Venerable of Lingbao, who was also looking back at him. Venerable, wait a moment. The Venerable of Lingbao indicated for Yi Zichen to calm down. Old geezer, that's not very nice of you. Since my old neighbor is here, why can't I go down? What's more, my older sister asked me to take care of this little brother. You're so temperamental. If you kill him in a fit of anger, then what about me? Then don't come over, said the old demon emperor. Hey, you old geezer. The venerable of Lingbao cursed in annoyance. At that moment, the old demon emperor snorted, I hate you, Yao. Just the smell of you disgusts me, especially the smell of a toad on you. I really regret not torturing you to death these past 10,000 years. The venerable of Lingbao's eyes instantly reddened. His true form was that of a three-legged golden toad. What he couldn't stand the most was people calling him a toad. He endured it when Xin Yuan Xiang called him that, but the other great emperors called him that because he'd stolen their divine artifacts. He endured it too. The old demon emperor had been imprisoned on the 3rd floor of the dungeon. They had no grudges against each other. They called him a toad. Old geezer, come out if you dare. I'll skin you alive. The way I see it, you've been locked up for too long and turned into a pervert. I'm talking to you nicely, but you don't understand human language. The venerable of Lingbao cursed in exasperation. The old demon emperor was unfazed. Come in and talk. Come out. Come in. The two experts bickered like children. Yi Zichen licked his lips and watched for a while, then pulled the venerable of Lingbao aside. Venerable, this old geezer is pissing me off. The venerable of Lingbao glared out the window and cursed, then frowned at Yi Zichen. You saw the situation yourself. This old geezer hates Yao. There's no way I'm going down with you. If I go down with you, I'm afraid I won't be able to control the primordial chaos within me. I'll directly neutralize it. Neutralize it? As long as the old demon emperor doesn't neutralize it, that's good enough. He hadn't even entered the 3rd floor, but the old demon emperor's aura had already forced him to take out his personal divine artifact. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker. Of course, these were just Yi Zichen's thoughts. He naturally wouldn't say them aloud. Then what do you think we should do? Asked Yi Zichen. You'll have to go down by yourself. The venerable of Lingbao shrugged. I want to go down with you, but the old geezer is adamant. What I said just now was pretty nasty. Even if I forcefully take you down, given our relationship, there's no way we'll have any interaction. From the way the old man talks, if you go down by yourself, you might have some unexpected developments, but I don't recommend you go down by yourself. Chapter 1605. The thick blood-red mist made it almost impossible to see the path under one's feet. This was the 3rd floor of the dungeon. However, unlike the other 2 levels of the dungeon, the 3rd level of the dungeon did not have a golden barrier. There was only a white-haired old man, a wooden bed, and a mess on the ground. The old man didn't even raise his head as he spoke in a low voice to the person walking down the stairs. Why are you here? The little guy thinks that you're a pervert, so he didn't choose to come down after some hesitation. Only this old friend of mine came down to see you out of the goodness of his heart. It was the venerable one of Lingbao. He was still dressed in a green robe, and there was a playful smile on his face. When the old demon emperor asked him to see him alone, he didn't dare to recklessly come down. At the end of the day, this was a major demon. Yi Zichen's cultivation level was far too low compared to this major power that not even the sovereign of spiritual treasures could deal with. He couldn't guarantee his own safety to communicate with this demon emperor who was in a berserk state. The old demon emperor had to see him, but that didn't mean he had no brains. Looking at the old demon emperor who was sitting cross-legged on the bed, there was not the slightest sign of madness. Even if the venerable of spiritual treasure, who was a demon, appeared 3 meters away from him, his aura was still gentle without any fluctuation. Even when the venerable of Lingbao called himself an old friend, the old demon emperor did not refute him. Sit. The old demon emperor actually pointed to a spot near the bed. If Yi Zichen saw such a friendly scene, he would definitely be flabbergasted. It was not that the old demon emperor hated the demon race. Not long ago, the venerable of numinous treasure sacrificed his natal magic treasure. The two of them were still cursing each other across the golden bell, but now they looked very harmonious. What's there to sit in this broken place of yours? Venerable Lingbao twisted his neck, took out 2 bottles of wine from his ring, and threw them in front of the old demon emperor. We'd better make some noise. If it's too peaceful, the little guy outside will be suspicious. Don't be fooled by the fact that this little fellow has only lived for a short time. His mind is very crafty. Yes, it is. He sent you here? The old demon emperor asked. Yes, I'll tell you the truth. Now that I've pledged my allegiance to him, you should understand what it means. The venerable of Lingbao chuckled. He is, yes. Suddenly, the two giants who stood at the pinnacle of the three realms fell silent. The two bottles of wine that venerable Lingbao threw to the old demon emperor were drained in the blink of an eye. He smashed the empty bottle on the ground. The venerable lord of Lingbao merely raised his eyebrows without saying a word. You came to find me this time to offer amnesty on behalf of that little fellow? Don't think that I don't know why he came to see me. It's impossible for the demon race to sell their lives for the human race. I'd rather live a dark life here than go out and serve the human race. For the sake of our 10,000 years of friendship, I'll let you go. Also, tell that heaven's chosen one not to come looking for me again. The old demon emperor said indifferently. You old man. The venerable of Lingbao shook his head with a wry smile. He touched his nose resentfully and looked at the old demon emperor, who clearly had enough strength to break out of the dungeon. But because of a bet, he had to stay here for tens of thousands of years. Shuehong Hai is dead, said the venerable lord of Lingbao. The old demon emperor suddenly froze on the bed. If you were looking at him directly, you'd clearly see the change in his expression. However, with his back to the venerable lord of Lingbao, he still looked as indifferent as ever. It's good that he's dead. You really are a fickle man. You should know very well that Shui Honghai risked being seen as a traitor by the human race to build this residence that conceals your aura for your safety. Yet you say it's good that he's dead. Are the two of you really bosom buddies? The venerable lord of Lingbao clearly knew some secrets that others didn't. Forget the current great emperors. Even Shui Yang, the former son of the Ocean Emperor, didn't know about the relationship between the old demon emperor and his father, Shui Honghai. It's none of your business, said the old demon emperor indifferently. After Shui Honghai imprisoned you, he went to the demon realm alone and hasn't returned since. You should know better than anyone what he did, said the venerable lord of Lingbao. I said it's none of your business. Boom. Instantly, a demonic, blood-colored mist burst forth from the old demon emperor's body. The venerable lord of Lingbao's fingers formed seals to resist the onslaught of the old demon emperor's berserk aura. Even in the end, Shui Honghai never forgot to avenge your sworn brother. Yet you hold up here for 10,000 years and turn a deaf ear to everything that happened outside. I feel bad for Shui Honghai. In the end, demons are still demons. Shui Honghai was full of hot blood and wanted to destroy your throne for you. What a despicable man. The venerable lord of Lingbao smiled disdainfully. With a flip of his hand, a cell phone appeared in his palm. He'd obtained it without Yi Zichen's knowledge. He'd wanted to give it to the demon emperor. However, after this exchange, he felt there was no longer any need. The phone in his palm was directly crushed by his demon power, and the remaining powder was gently scattered on the ground. What a waste of time. The venerable lord of Lingbao turned around and left without so much as a backward glance. The old demon emperor, who'd been sitting on his bed, suddenly turned around. His violet eyes glared at the venerable lord of Lingbao's back. Who the hell are you? You shouldn't know any of this. Who I am isn't important at all. What's important is that after this exchange, you've truly disappointed me. The venerable lord of Lingbao turned his back to the old demon emperor, his eyes filled with disdain. Holding up like a turtle in exchange for 10,000 years of peace. Is that what you want? In this sunless place, it seems. Back then, you looked down on everyone with disdain. Your heroic spirit has been ground away. I hope you can enjoy the rest of your life in prison and hold on to that bed in your heart. Stop right there, roared the old demon emperor. Do you have any more questions? The venerable lord of Lingbao turned around and chuckled at the old demon emperor. If you want to attack me, I advise you not to even think about it. You're no match for me. You're not from this era at all. Yes or no, it still has nothing to do with you. Besides, you've already chosen to hide here, so what's the point of caring so much? You just need to stay here obediently and vent your anger from time to time. making those little fellows in the dungeon feel fear and gain the trust of their hearts. The satisfaction he felt was enough. That's right, Shuehonghai, what a pity. The venerable of numinous treasure pursed his lips and left without looking back. No matter how much the old demon emperor shouted, he didn't stop. Chapter 1606. Azure seas, blue skies, green mountains, and clear waters. He was finally out. As he looked at the clear skies and thought back to his experiences, Yi Zichen inexplicably let out a sigh of relief. In the end, he hadn't gone to see the old demon emperor. His reason was laughably simple. He was afraid of death. A human's life could be lighter than a feather or heavier than Mount Tai. Yi Zichen could sacrifice himself, and he could do it without hesitation. But if there was no value in dying, he wouldn't do it. He had far too many things to take care of, and he had to deal with the unknown demon emperor. He didn't dare take the risk. That heavy pressure made it hard for him to breathe. He'd thought he'd met enough experts, but after running into the venerable of numinous treasure and the enraged demon emperor, he realized how narrow-minded he'd been. He believed that in the vast three realms of gods, Yao, and demons, there would surely be even more powerful existences hidden from the world. He just didn't know how the great sage was doing. Before entering the third floor, Yi Zichen was worried about the great sage's condition. He'd seen how grievous his injuries were. Little did he know, Yang Jian and the others, who'd brought the great sage out to treat his injuries, were right outside the dungeon. As soon as Yi Zichen appeared, they approached. However, only Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan were present. The great sage was nowhere to be seen. Yi Zichen looked around carefully, but couldn't find any trace of the great sage. When he looked at Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan's expressions, they didn't seem worried in the slightest. How come it's just the two of you? Where's the great sage? Why aren't you with him? How are his injuries? Oh well, son, I'm here. Before Yang Jian could finish speaking, a familiar, resonant cry reverberated through the sky. The great sage, standing atop an auspicious cloud, tumbled down from the sky. He didn't look injured in the slightest. What's going on? Yi Zichen was dumbfounded. He'd clearly seen the great sage gravely injured, and he looked dispirited. It had only been 6 hours. Even a divine pill couldn't heal him this quickly. Could it be Su Yan? As soon as the thought occurred to him, Yi Zichen dismissed it. Su Yan was still on the 10th divine mountain. She'd used up too much of her godhead's divine power to save the outsiders. Given how much Su Lu doted on her, there was no way she'd let her do anything. Besides, there was no way she would know that the great sage was heavily injured, since she was far away on the 10th divine mountain. The hermit emperor was no longer in the sea of innocence. The great sage's recovery was truly strange. You recovered? Yi Zichen was shocked. Old son, am very energetic now. The great sage grinned and patted his chest loudly. Yang Jian curled his lips and said, he really is a stone monkey. At first, I thought it would be good if he died just like that. Who knew that this guy's life is so tough? He's alive and kicking in less than an hour. His cultivation seems to have increased a bit, said Pu Jingwan. My son, if I, old son, were to die just like this, wouldn't you lose a good father like me? In order to see you grow up, I, old son, will have to live on well and fight to see you die before me. The great sage laughed. Stop and shut up, you can. Yang Jian rolled his eyes and ignored him. We wanted to go in and find you, but as soon as we entered the second floor, the demon emperor's aura prevented us from taking even half a step further. We had no choice but to come out and wait for you. Yi Zichen didn't really care about that. He cared more about the great sage's injuries. Yi Zichen nodded in response, then walked up to the great sage's side and placed his fingers on his pulse. The great sage knew what Yi Zichen was going to do, so he didn't resist in the slightest. He simply let Yi Zichen's divine power flow through his body. Strange. Before long, Yi Zichen lowered his hand and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Isn't that right? Old son, am doing just fine. The great sage laughed. Yang Jian said, we've also investigated the monkey's condition, but to our surprise, his cells are far more active than before, and his divine power is even more abundant. Yi Zichen nodded. The results of his investigation were exactly as Yang Jian had said. By now, the great sage's cells were as lively as if he'd just gotten a freshman class. His divine power seemed to have been cleansed as well, becoming incomparably pure. It was truly a spectacle, but the way Yi Zichen saw it, it wasn't necessarily a good sign. He'd have to wait until they met the Hermit Emperor and have him examine him properly. Right, Yi Zi, how come you're the only one who came out? Did the Demon Emperor see you? Asked Yang Jian. I didn't, but I sent the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. He said he could speak briefly with the Demon Emperor on my behalf, said Yi Zichen. I don't trust the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. Yang Jian's expression darkened. That guy's always hard to read. I was already worried when he said he'd take you with him, and now he's the one going to see the Demon Emperor. Didn't they say the Demon Emperor hates Yao the most? He's Yao too, right? What gives him the right to see the Demon Emperor? How can he meet the Demon Emperor? Furthermore, the way this dungeon is acting right now is a little too peaceful. Before Yang Jian even finished speaking, the dungeon suddenly emanated a turbulent aura. Since the dungeon was protected by seals, the aura it emitted had already weakened considerably. However, judging from the outside, it was clear that there was a battle going on inside. The only people who could be weakened so much and still be detected were naturally the Venerable of Numinous Treasure and the Demon Emperor. Isn't that a slap in the face? Laughed the great sage. I just suspected Numinous Treasure, and then they started fighting. Isn't that a slap in the face? I don't think there's anything wrong with the Venerable of Numinous Treasure. He suits my tastes. Isn't that because you two share the same interests? Yang Jian curled his lips. Can't we share the same interests? The great sage rolled his eyes. Also, be more polite when you speak to me. Right now, I feel like my body has an endless supply of energy. If I hit you, I'm afraid your tiny body won't be able to withstand my torment. After being injured, the great sage's cultivation had risen. Yang Jian wasn't stupid enough to fight him head-on. Yang Jian ignored the great sage's mockery, crossed his arms, and sensed the fluctuations emanating from the dungeon. He couldn't help but shake his head. I still don't think this guy can be trusted. Yang Jian didn't respond. The great sage was somewhat bored, so he ran off to the side to play with his phone. Pu Jingwan looked at Yang Jian with a strange expression. It's rare for you to be so sure of someone. A man's sixth sense is super accurate. Yang Jian narrowed his eyes, still staring at the dungeon. From the moment he'd laid eyes on the Venerable of Numinous Treasure, he'd sensed something strange about him. Thinking back to his interactions with Yi Zichen, it was obvious he'd done it on purpose. Chapter 16:07. When he saw the great sage's frantic expression, Yi Zichen took out his phone. He hadn't seen any extra messages in the group, so it was obvious that the great sage was referring to the Heavenly Palace and Underworld Immortals in the Red Packet server. Barefoot Immortal. What exactly is this? Wu Gang. I can feel the pressure that makes me tremble. Immortality Peach Fairy. Wow. Is this real or fake? I'm still in the Immortality Peach Garden. I can't see anything. Kitchen God. I feel like something big is about to happen. Lu Dongbin. What exactly is going on? Iron Crutchley. What's that coffin for? God of Food. Is that a coffin? I thought it was a mountain. Jade Girl. I'm scared. Golden Boy. Jade Girl, don't be scared. I'll protect you. Immortality Peach Fairy. Queen Mother. Do you know what's going on? Barefoot Immortal. Queen Mother and the others went to pick up Emperor Ye's people. Even if you at her, she can't reply right now. But even if this phenomenon appears in the immortal region, the Queen Mother and the others will definitely see it. Lu Dongbin. Did the Buddha say anything? Barefoot Immortal. No. I can't chat with you guys any longer. It's time to return to the Buddhist domain. Once I receive some guidance from the Buddha, I'll definitely share it with everyone in the group. Immortality Peach Fairy. Thank you, Great Immortal. Yi Zichen read the messages in the group in bewilderment. He couldn't tell what the immortals were trying to say just from their conversations. But between the lines, one could sense the seriousness that they revealed. And here I thought it was a preparation group, said Pu Jingwan. She wasn't in the Red Packet server, so she naturally didn't know what was going on. Yang Jian and the great sage didn't respond. Instead, they looked solemnly at the group chat. Yi Zichen scrolled through the chat logs and saw that it was a short video sent by an ordinary heavenly soldier. He clicked on the video. Fierce winds howled. The daytime sky instantly turned pitch black, and the howling wind sounded like the wailing of a malicious spirit. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, and the muffled claps of thunder slammed into the viewers' chests like heavy hammers. When the video ended, Yi Zichen took a deep breath and stared at the closed screen in silence. This was just a short video, but it still made people feel like they were there. If he was really in the video, this suffocating atmosphere would be even more serious. There was also a video below that. It was embellished by the previous video. Before opening it, Yi Zichen had already mentally prepared himself. Crackle. The muffled thunder in the void landed with a loud rumble. The power of this thunder actually caused a mountain range to collapse. After that, countless bolts of lightning rained down, and the mountain range that stretched for thousands of miles was completely smashed into pieces. The howling gales swept all the rubble from the broken mountain range to thousands of miles away. The place where the mountain used to be was now a scorched black flatland. However, when he looked at the mountain range, Yi Zichen felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. If he wasn't mistaken, this was actually the Howling Valley. The Howling Canyon, which had been given the name of the lower realm, had actually been erased by a few bolts of lightning. An extremely heavy panting suddenly appeared in the video. It was obvious that the panting was caused by the heavenly soldier who was recording the video. However, what exactly had happened to make him gasp so heavily? The camera of the video returned to the void. Suddenly, a huge fissure appeared in the pitch-black sky. The fissure was pitch black, invisible to the naked eye. However, within the darkness, two people in mourning clothes walked out. It was impossible to tell if they were male or female. That was the end of the second video. Yi Zichen eagerly opened the third video, only to discover that it wasn't connected to the second. At the very beginning, several people in mourning clothes appeared in the sky. Due to the angle of the recording, it was impossible to tell how many people there were. However, a simple guess was that there were 8 of them. Above their heads was a mountain. Yi Zichen estimated that the mountain was roughly the size of a destroyed Howling Canyon. Among them, there was a man wearing a hat and mourning clothes walking in the middle. He stood with his head lowered and carried a basket on his arm. It was obviously an empty basket, but as long as he put his hand into it, he would grab a handful of golden money and throw it down. That's a coffin. Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. He suddenly recalled the immortality Peach Fairy's conversation in the group chat. At first, he thought that the 8 people in mourning clothes were carrying a mountain. But now that they were all in mourning clothes, it was obvious that the mountain they were carrying was actually a coffin. The video ended abruptly because at the end of the third video, Yi Zichen could see that the person who'd tossed the paper looked directly into the camera's eyes for a brief moment. Presumably, the heavenly soldier knew that he'd been discovered and didn't dare continue recording. Yi Zichen closed the video and fell silent. Suddenly, he sensed 3 pairs of eyes staring at him. He looked up and saw, to his astonishment, Yang Jian, the great sage, and Pu Jingwan. "What? Don't you have any thoughts?" asked Yang Jian. "Wow, I feel like I'm filming a sci-fi movie. It's so cool," said Pu Jingwan. It seemed she'd seen the video as well. Perhaps the spiritual energy fluctuations down below are because of this video, said the great sage. In truth, it wasn't possible to tell much from a video alone. After all, a video was just a video, not a 3D video. There was no way to experience it for yourself. However, this sort of abnormal phenomenon was indeed very concerning. Yi Zichen hesitated for a moment, then opened up the red packet server. The immortals were still discussing the video, and a few heavenly soldiers chimed in, saying that they'd seen it too. However, the heavenly soldier who'd sent the video hadn't spoken up yet. Yi Zichen clicked on his profile picture, then sent him a friend request. In just a few breaths of time, the friend request was accepted. Emperor Yi. The heavenly soldier's message was followed by a few terrified emojis. In truth, it was normal for him to react this way. He was just an ordinary heavenly soldier in the heavenly court. He hadn't even become an immortal yet. Yi Zichen was publicly acknowledged as a great immortal. Since he'd taken the initiative to add him as a friend, the heavenly soldier was naturally terrified. I've already seen the video you sent. I want to ask you, where exactly is the coffin? Is it the Howling Gorge? I don't know, replied the soldier. When I was recording the video, I sensed that they'd noticed, so I returned to the heavenly court. I didn't dare spy on them. I see. Yi Zichen couldn't help but feel somewhat disappointed. He gestured for the soldier to get back to his business, then narrowed his eyes and stared at the 3 videos in silence. Chapter 1608. When Yi Zichen's friend request froze, Yang Jian and the others quickly noticed. They gathered around, then stared blankly at the request. What's the meaning of this? Why did he add you as a friend? That guy still has the nerve to add you. For Yang Jian, the great sage, and Pu Jingwan to say something like that, it was obvious they knew this person. I'm not sure either. Yi Zichen stared blankly for a long while, then shook his head. This person's request was actually quite simple. I am Guli. These 4 simple words proved everything. Guli. He'd been Yi Zichen's enemy since the modern realm. It wasn't until Enlu's arrival that their relationship had improved somewhat. However, Guli's sins couldn't be washed clean by the incident with the 9-tailed foxes. He'd told them to leave purely because he didn't want to ruin Enlu's pure heart. It had nothing to do with Guli. Now, he'd actually added him as a friend. Just as everyone was wondering about Guli's friend request, another friend request popped up on top of his confirmation message. Big brother Yi, it's Enlu. Although he knew Enlu was with Guli, Yi Zichen accepted her request without hesitation. He clicked on Enlu's chat window and saw her typing a message. My image in front of you is really terrible. When he saw the message, Yi Zichen knew it was from Guli. What's up? Since it wasn't Enlu, Yi Zichen naturally wouldn't treat her too kindly. Although they were just words, Yi Zichen was sure Guli could read the distance between them. If there wasn't anything else, wouldn't I be looking for you, cousin? This form of address caused Yi Zichen's hand to stiffen inexplicably. In truth, there was nothing wrong with Guli calling him that. Yi Rong was a member of the Gu family, and Yi Zichen and Guli really were cousins. However, when he recalled Guli's past misdeeds, he felt a bit disgusted. Huh. Yi Zichen sent a cold chuckle, and before long, Guli replied, There might be a big misunderstanding between us. That's not important. If you have something to say, then say it. If you don't, then don't use Enlu's account to disgust me. Guli, the Fox Clan situation has indeed changed my opinion of you. But do you really think I can completely forget everything you've done? Yi said. Chen sent a message with a gloomy expression. Brother Yi, although Guli was using Enlu's account, she was actually right next to him. Enlu naturally took note of Yi Zichen's resolute reply. She liked Yi Zichen very much. He'd save her life when she was in danger. Later, even though he hated demons so much, even though he knew she was a demon, he still treated her like his own little sister. She loved Guli very much, to the bone. She really wanted Yi Zichen and Guli to become good friends, but reality was always so cruel. From Yi Zichen's words, she could sense the impossibility of that happening. All right, that's my problem. Guli smiled warmly, then rubbed Enlu's head. I really did go overboard earlier. It's no surprise that my clan brother is like this. Guli took a deep breath, then smiled as usual. If Yi Zichen were standing in front of him, he discovered that Guli was much less vicious than before. Instead, he seemed more mellow and gentle. He gently wiped the screen with his single arm and replied with a smile. Fine, then I won't waste any more time on pleasantries. Naturally, I have something to tell you. Just say it, said Yi Zichen. The God Emperor's tomb has fallen. You should have sensed it, right? Guli tapped the screen. The key fragments are in our hands. Shouldn't we work together? The God Emperor's tomb? Suddenly, Yi Zichen recalled the videos the heavenly soldiers had sent him. Could it be? The God Emperor's tomb is in the lower 3 realms? Guli chuckled. It's in the lower 3 realms. Within half a month, the tomb will completely fall to the ground. When that happens, we'll need our keys to open it. However, we don't have all of them. The other key was in Tai Bai Jinxing's hands. The other is on the last floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. How do you know? Of course I know. You should hurry up and reach the ruler realm within half a month, then open the last floor and obtain the key. Let's open the tomb as soon as possible. The era is coming to an end. Every second counts. I'm sure you know better than anyone, replied Gu Li, but why should I work together with you? I won't make you agree right now. When that day comes, I'm sure you'll choose to work with me. Gu Li chuckled, then ended the conversation. Hurry up and break through to ruler. We don't have much time left. Will Big Brother you really go with you? He locked his phone, then peeked out from atop Gu Li's head and pouted. Gu Li chuckled and nodded, his fingers gently brushing and loose black hair. He will. When that day comes, he'll naturally choose to work with me. Even though our relationship is terrible, I'm his best partner. This guy's really full of himself, said Pu Jingwan, rolling her eyes. She'd interacted with Gu Li the least, but since Yi Zichen hated her, she hated Gu Li as well. I think it's best to only believe half of Gu Li's words, said Yang Jian. Back in the lower three realms, he was the one who kept stirring up trouble. Who knows how many people died in the Heavenly Palace, Underworld, Immortal Region, and Endless Beast Region. I ascended early. If I hadn't, I'd have torn my head off. Why else would I have caused so much trouble? He's done all sorts of bad things in the upper three realms too, snorted Pu Jingwan. Are those videos of the God Emperor's tomb? Asked the great sage. Yi Zichen nodded. Although Gu Li's character wasn't all that great, he wasn't the type to say things without thinking. Gu Li from the outside stood behind him, so he definitely knew some secrets that even Yi Zichen didn't. As for the key fragment to the God Emperor's tomb, Yi Zichen had actually been holding onto Tai Bai Jinxing's piece. Gu Li had a fake one, which was why he thought Tai Bai Jinxing really did have it. As for the final key fragment, it really was on the last floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda,